Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Our program is about to begin. Please welcome Semafor's Andrew Friedman.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, Semafor World Economy, Day 4. It has been a marathon of a week. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Andrew Friedman, General Manager and Head of Public Affairs and Corporate Partnerships here at Semafor. Semafor was launched 3 years ago at a time defined by information overload, eroding trust, and accelerating complexity. We set out, though, to provide the antidote to all of that. Fair-minded, transparent, global intelligence for the new world economy. Semafor World Economy, which we're all gathered here today for, it truly brings that vision to life. It is now the largest gathering of global CEOs in America, convening more than 500 global leaders, hundreds of top leaders between business, government, from more than 89 countries annually here in Washington, D.C. The discussions you'll hear this afternoon, and hopefully you've also been a part of already this week, they're driven by Semafor's global newsroom, who have gathered here from our bureaus in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Gulf. Our conversations focus on helping leaders navigate extraordinary complexity by curating and servicing the richest insights, ideas, and diverse perspectives on the new world economy. This afternoon's session, Global Tastemakers, Culture, and Soft Power, it's a fantastic lineup, by the way, you picked a good room, brings together conversations on how cultural leaders are navigating a new era where authenticity, provenance, and generational shifts in wealth are reshaping influence, status, and what it means to build a lasting brand. Again, thank you all so much for being here at Semafor World Economy. And with that, let's get to the news. Cheers.
Welcome Neil Blumenthal of Warby Parker, Joanna Garrity of JetBlue, and Stephanie Rule of MS Now News.
Thank you both. I am super excited to do a panel that's not about the war. I think this is a really exciting conversation because JetBlue, Warby Parker, right, came into super mature, developed industries as these disruptive upstarts, so cool and relevant. But now you're 25 years old and you're 16 years old at a time when we have the influencer economy where they're setting the rules. So now that you are these dominant players in the industries that you're in, how do you keep your market power and at the same time be the innovative, exciting, cool brand?
I think it all comes down to culture. So, yeah, 16 years, that sounds really old, but we still think of ourselves as being in the first inning. When we're hiring, and I'm still very involved with, I still do final round interviews for everybody at corporate, all of our store managers, the leadership of our manufacturing facilities, the leadership of our CX teams, because I want them to know that we care. And I'm looking for, are people proactive? Do their values align with the company? And part of that is, learn, grow, repeat is one of our core values. And if you're curious and if you see problems and you come up with solutions and you take the first step towards solving them, then you can always be on your front foot and be innovating constantly.
I'd say JetBlue was founded with the mission of bringing humanity back to air travel. And over the years, we've discuss whether that mission still holds true. And coming out of COVID and in this world that is just so different than 1999, 2000 when JetBlue first started, I think that mission rings true now more than ever. When you think about everything customers who fly are faced with, our crew members who work in an environment that's incredibly volatile. Volatility is frankly, I think, the new normal. AI is going to eventually be the equivalent of electricity. I think humanity becomes the new luxury. And it's
what does that mean?
Yeah, it's really how you're able to differentiate the experience with your people. So we long said that competitors could match the TVs, they could match the leather seats, they could match the Wi-Fi, and indeed they have. But what they haven't matched are our people. And I continue to firmly believe that JetBlue has among the best people. Because we hire people who actually like customers. One of the things we look at when we're hiring is volunteerism and a proxy for customer service. During COVID, it was hard because we just had to hire to fill seats and fill positions because there was such a shock to the system. But now with time and space, we're able to really redouble our efforts around how do you bring humanity back to air travel. In an industry that sometimes can feel anything but humane, there are moments where you can really, really bring it.
Authenticity is this word we always hear. It's like the new disruptive innovation. And people can't really put their finger on what it is, but when you see it, you know it. How do you create it?
I think authenticity comes down to like what are the reasons why you do things, and in the age of the internet, right, you can't hide. Any individual can find out anything about another individual or a company, and can go really deep. So authenticity usually is, hey, what are the details and the reasons for why a company does something? So like I was just learning about the name Semafor and where it comes from and the fact that it means signal, and it means that in multiple different languages, and they have aspirations, right, to be one of the most preeminent global media companies, right? That all makes sense, and that adds authenticity to the Semafor brand. Similar, Warby Parker, we started this to build a brand that was around great value, fun, doing good in the world. Our first collection was inspired by the eyewear that our grandparents wore in the 40s and 50s, and the social ethos of our parents who came of age in the 60s and read the Beat generation. The name Warby Parker comes from two early Jack Kerouac characters, Warby Pepper and Zag Parker. We discovered those characters in the New York Public Library, where we believe that we're on track to be an iconic New York brand. So I share that level of detail to say, like, that's how you build authenticity, is to have reasons and details for everything that you do. And sure enough, our first fashion presentation was at the New York Public Library, the main branch on 42nd and 5th Avenue. The four of us that started the company, we met while we were at graduate school. One of our first stores was actually a school bus. We bought an old yellow school bus. We ripped out the interiors. We put old shelving in it. We went across the country, went to over 20 cities, and in each city we went to 3 intersections. And suddenly we had sales data on where we performed best. And actually, the place that we performed best was right here in Georgetown on M in Wisconsin. So where do we have a store? On M in Wisconsin. But again, the reasons for this activation and to have the Warby Parker class trip, right, goes back to the heritage of us as students and learning that helps drive innovation, et cetera. So it all comes down to details.
You better be careful. That sounds intellectual, academic, and woke, and he might get outlawed. Worried. So quickly buy those Warby Parker glasses while the business still exists. What does authenticity mean to JetBlue?
I mean, I think we try to be uniquely JetBlue. We are a 5% player in the United States. There are 4 large carriers that dominate the industry.
Only 5%?
5%.
I bet would this room have guessed higher than that? When you think about JetBlue, would you have guessed it was higher than 5%?
Yeah.
Definitely would.
And our brand, it boxes above our weight. But part of, I think, what we've done a great job with is knowing our customer, knowing our culture, knowing our people, and really focusing on the places that we can be authentically, uniquely JetBlue. So liveries, we're known for our aircraft liveries. Some of the first that we launched were police and firefighters. Why? Because we have a lot of retired police and firefighters who are our in-flight crew members, who, by the way, are the best in-flight crew members because they understand service and emergencies and how to respond in crisis. So that's, I think, a great example. Other partnerships that we've had, we don't partner with sometimes the big brands, probably because we can't afford to, but more importantly because our customers want our brand to resonate with partnerships that they see in their daily life. We actually had Taylor Swift at our terminal back, I think in like 2005. We could not afford her now, but we did a partnership with Ann Michael May, Drake May's wife, well before she was doing partnerships with a lot of others, and we did a Bad Bunny partnership when he went to Puerto Rico last year before the Super Bowl, for people who live in Puerto Rico because we're the largest carrier in Puerto Rico. So we really try to focus on those moments that we can bring the JetBlue brand, the intersection of the JetBlue brand with other brands that speak to humanity, speak to value, low fares, serving not just the top of the K curve, but serving all customers in a great way. We struggled a very long time deciding to introduce first class because we were concerned that we were known as a very egalitarian brand, and we didn't want to lose that. But our first class is accessible first class. Our lounge that we just launched this year, Blue House, we know we can't have a 20,000 square foot lounge and 5-star service, but we could do something uniquely JetBlue. And it's an eclectic New York home. The ceiling is painted like Grand Central Station, the ceiling of Grand Central Station. We've got crew member artwork, and by all measures, I think folks were wondering what it was going to look like and how was it going to compete with the others. And I think the verdict is out in that we shot the lights out on that one because it speaks to who we are. We're not trying to be somebody other than JetBlue.
Neil, you mentioned a moment ago, now you can reach out to anybody, you can find out about anybody, and you were talking about it under the umbrella of hiring. How do you respond, right? We are now in a world where anyone, right, you're both consumer-facing businesses. Anyone, a customer, somebody posing as a customer, a foil, could take to social media, create content coming after your business that could impact your business. How do you handle that?
I think you need to start working on it the day before and the weeks before and the months and the years before.
So people trust you going in.
So people trust you going in. So what can you do to build as much goodwill as possible, knowing that you will face a ton of crises? And we were just talking about, right, how volatility is the norm. And the way that you sort of manage through volatility is by having a clear North Star, but also leveraging the goodwill that you've earned. I think about that even personally. Us being able to build Warby Parker, especially as graduate students, was thanks to the generosity of a lot of our friends, of family friends, of our classmates, of our former coworkers and our former bosses who, when we called to ask for advice or for introductions, they were happy to do it because of the goodwill that we had earned. And similarly, right, in sort of this environment, right, where, yeah, you're just waiting for the next punch, per se, earning that by, every single day delivering value, every day providing great customer experience. Like, what is the metric that I look most closely at? It's Net Promoter Score, right? It's probably the best measure of customer satisfaction. And if that starts to drop for any reason, right, we're going really deep into that. And we measure every part of the customer journey. So you come into one of our stores and you buy something, obviously you're getting multiple surveys. You get an adjustment, that's a different score. You have an eye exam, a different score. And we're evaluating ourselves, right, on all those metrics.
How do you manage this? Because I would say you have a much higher bar than Neil does, because people on airplanes are just pissed off.
I'll say I saw some of the best of humanity 2 weeks ago during the TSA shutdown. We had at Terminal 5 at JFK 4-hour-long lines. The TSA agents were working their tails off.
And not getting paid.
You had a lot of support from business partners. We deployed our entire corporate staff out there to help manage the lines. I was out there several days handing out water, managing some of the lines. There was a pole people couldn't see around, so I was directing around the pole. Nobody blamed the airline for it. Everybody empathized with the TSA for it. But you actually saw, airline travel is all about humanity, and it's all about people coming together in this shared experience. And you're always going to have the folks that don't understand that and are disruptive, but the vast, vast, vast majority of moments that we deliver every day are wonderful moments. And we have 40 million customers a year, and we tend to focus on the person that puts their bare feet on a tray table or starts screaming at somebody on a flight. I know, so please don't take your shoes off on an airplane. It's not a good idea.
That is high on my list.
I know, but there's a whole website. There's a whole website dedicated to it, by the way. It's crazy. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of moments are actually wonderful moments, and it's this shared experience. And I think it'd be great to focus more on that. We have to drown out the noise. Social media cuts both ways. We've had people boycott flights for mistakes that have been made. We own the mistakes when we've made one, or our crew members have to evolve their policy. But at the end of the day, what we do is amazing, and I try to focus on that. My team tries to focus on that. course correct when something needs to be fixed, admit a mistake. We measure Net Promoter Score. We're actually back at the top of the industry, which is amazing last year, top NPS score in the markets we serve. But it all comes down to it's a shared experience. And I think we all have to recognize that. And frankly, the world has become just a more hostile place. And during that shutdown, it gave me hope that in moments like that, there was so much humanity. It was pretty amazing.
But can't that be a business strategy? If we're aware that the world has become a more hostile place, if you choose to be the business that leads with gratitude and values goodwill as an actual asset, can't that be part of a winning strategy? Because it is an outlier right now.
Well, that's our brand.
Completely. And I like to think of our stores as oases. So, right, there's a lot of chaos in the world. You walk into one of our stores. Yes, we sell a fashion accessory, but it's a health product. And those stores need to be calm. They need to be beautiful. They need to deliver an exceptional experience. And it's also why I don't fear, a drugstore chain opening up like opticals to sort of supplement their pharmacies, because what's the first thing that you want to do when you walk into like a convenience store? Is you want to get out of there as fast as humanly possible.
Whereas, I can't, because it takes 20 minutes for the person to unlock the
right,
case.
Completely.
So I can buy shaving cream. I can't get out of there. Okay.
Whereas, right, I want people to come into our stores to browse, to linger. Like putting on glasses is fun.
Yes.
And there are these small details that make a difference. Like when we were customers of other brands, we'd walk into an optical shop. The glasses would be in a glass display or behind the counter, out of reach. You were constantly upsold, so you walked out of that optical shop feeling like you've been ripped off. So we have transparent pricing, but glasses at eye level, well lit, full length mirrors. Like these little details are what contribute to a great customer experience and what contribute to humanity, because you're actually designing an experience based on empathy by putting yourself in the customer's shoes.
We were talking sort of about the influencer and the content creator economy sort of now kind of running things, and the fact that anybody can write a social media post that impacts your business. Do you see that changing? Like, do you think we're going to exhaust ourselves of this influencer economy, that they've got everything to say? Because they're not necessarily expert. We're not necessarily going to go back to the Mad Men days of advertising, but kind of where we are now, with any person on the street suddenly saying, like, well, I'm the one who knows glasses in America. Like, are we going to get past that to some sort of middle ground, whether it's in the eyeglass business or the airline business or any business?
I don't see that happening in the near future.
God, I'd really like to.
We have to manage and live within that. And, I think the best piece of advice that we take every day at JetBlue, my team, is we have to control what we can control and execute that very well. Because there's so much noise out there. If you pay attention to it, it will literally take you down for the day. And so you really need to focus on, I would love for an airport and an airline flight to be an oasis. I'll pull that word, an oasis, a JetBlue Oasis flight. But at the end of the day, you really have to focus on the things you can control. And when you can nail it, you have to nail it. So blue sky days, we talk about in the airline industry, there's enough bad weather, we can't control that. That disrupts everybody. But when the day is blue, like blue sky today, we have to deliver. And we have to show that when everything works, we can really excel. Because back at the root of it, what we do is amazing. It's a miracle that you can fly between New York and Florida in 2.5 hours, 30,000 feet in the air. That is a miracle. And I think sometimes you forget that in the noise of everything else.
It is a tumultuous time. It's a hostile environment. The economy is tricky. What are consumers telling you?
That they appreciate great value, they appreciate good experiences. For every pair of glasses we sell, we distribute one to someone in need, and we've now distributed over 25 million pairs of glasses to people around the world and here at home as well. And we see, you mentioned the word gratitude. We see more gratitude about that program, and we're not that loud with it because we also recognize, when people are deciding to buy glasses, it's usually, hey, how do they look on my face? Second price, third if at all. Then, like, what do these glasses mean in the broader context of doing well? But one of the things that we've observed, especially since COVID, is that consumers respond to sort of news much faster than ever before. And I think you see that in the volatility of consumer sentiment. I think you see it in the volatility of retail traffic and sales.
We get scared quicker because also the algorithm is training us to panic quicker.
To scare us completely. So we'll see it, and when I speak to other CEOs, they see it as well, and we're constantly like calling each other, hey, what, are you experiencing some traffic challenges? Oh, it's back already, and it's been 48 hours. So one of the things that we need to look at is obviously we're looking at data by the minute, by the hour, by the day, but also over longer periods, and there we see a little more continuity. But it's, again, we're working in, just as the media landscape is volatile, the consumer landscape is volatile.
Yeah, I mean, consumers want value. I think that's one of the main things, and it's challenging in this environment where fuel is, because obviously fuel is the second biggest input cost after labor for airlines. So value is top of the list. On time. If you're based in New York or even DC, you realize air traffic is an incredibly significant impediment to on-time travel. Fortunately, some work is happening there, so they want on-time, good value, and then they want to be treated well. And that's where humanity comes in. The compliments that we get are almost entirely about our crew. So you'll get criticized for poor value or not being on time. You won't get compliments for that, but you will get compliments for how you're treated on a flight. And when you think about flying, those flights that you actually remember, it's usually the in-flight crew member. It's probably not the movie you watched or the food. It's probably how that in-flight crew member made you feel, or maybe a pilot made you feel. And so that's where we focus in the feedback that we get. We've actually just started putting a survey out after every flight to our customers, Make a Crew Member's Day, where you can actually fill out, you get a little survey, it has emojis of our crew members, and you can fill out a compliment to our crew members if you had a great experience. We actually aren't collecting negative feedback, and if we get it, we suppress it, and we share the compliments with our crew members, because who doesn't like to feel good that they've done something special? And that's really trying to tap into how our crew members can know what matters most to customers and where they have the biggest impact.
How do you both create that, right? Because both of your companies are great examples, but walking into a Warby Parker, and I'm not here to sell their glasses, but people who work there, you can tell, love working there. They're so happy to be part of that. And when you say it's the crew members, why are your crew members psyched to be there when they're not at your competitors and they're not at yours? Besides what you're paying them, because you work in super competitive industries and you don't necessarily have the ability to pay them up so much, what are you delivering to your employee that makes them want to deliver to the customer at a time when so many industries we're not experiencing that?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks are self-selecting to come to Warby Parker because of our mission, which is vision for all. Right? We want to help the world see. We think about that figuratively and literally. Literally, how do we, help provide glasses that enable people to see to fulfill their lives? And
your employees want to be part of that mission.
They want to be part of that. I mean, we talk more about our Buy a Pair, Give a Pair program internally than we do externally, because that's super motivating. We just had I was just chatting with a team member who returned from Guatemala. If you're at Warby Parker 7 years, we send you on a trip so you can see some of these programs in action that we have overseas. And she was just so incredibly motivated. And I think that also, the folks that are really motivated by that also aren't assholes. And people want to work in a place where people are kind and nice and collaborative. And I think that, if you have that, that's the foundation. Again, lead with values, then they're going to deliver great customer experiences every day.
Would you guys liken that to, on a government level, what one would call soft power? And you're really investing in that. And people think or hear the word love in this like weak, feminized way. But what I'm hearing is this theme of kind of the power of love and goodness and decency is in large part the power that's driving your business next to the business analytics.
So we have two large goals in our strategy: be profitable, because we're not. There's challenges with scale in the industry that need to be addressed. And the second one is be loved. And at the end of the day, our crew members join JetBlue because we are a different type of culture. It is non-hierarchical. The view is that we serve, the entirety of the traveling public, that we offer differentiated experiences, that we do it in a unique JetBlue way, and you're not a number. And we've been around for 25, 26 years. We have crew members that have been with us the whole time. And the culture evolves and it changes as you get bigger. But at the end of the day, the crew member, we're all crew members at JetBlue. There are no leaders. We are all crew members in this together. It's one big team sport. On the great days and on the tough days. And at the end of the day, I think our crew members feel that. It's definitely harder sometimes as you grow because you do end up with some folks that maybe don't quite support where you want to go. But at the end of the day, it all starts with taking care of your crew member, recognizing that you take care of them, they in turn take care of the customer experience.
Well, I would argue the best strategy to receive love is to start by giving it. And I have loved being on the stage with you all and being here with you. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Please welcome Byung-Soo Kim of the University of Southern California, Jimmy Iovine of USC Iovine and Young Academy, and Gus Wenner of Wenner Media and Trackstar.
Hello, Ben.
How are you?
Closer.
I know, I feel so far away.
It feels a little far away. It does.
The furthest we've been away all day.
That's it.
Jimmy, President Kim, thank you. I would love to hear what inspired you to start the Young and Iovine Academy in 2013. Your experiences in tech and music that gave you this inspiration.
Well, Dre and I worked together for a long time, since 1990, and we've had a lot of experience with, for example, in the music industry, which is a great example of this. It's very siloed thinking, and there's a reason why today all the distribution for the labels is with tech companies. The audience, the customer, is outside of the actual industry. And now they're having to face that reality. And the reason is because most people in the music industry and in the movie industry are slightly intimidated or don't want to play with tech. And so we saw that, and then we started Beats. And when we started Beats, we went to hire people, and they were either engineers, designers, creatives, and they couldn't communicate. Then we went to Apple, and we sold our company to Apple, and we started seeing some of the same stuff. See, Steve Jobs was a miracle. We all know that. That's why so many people admire him, but they don't understand. Some of them don't understand what was really magic about him, was he understood were the crosses of technology and liberal arts, right? So where those things come together, especially today, is very, very, very important. So we saw these things and we said, you know what? The problem is in education. Education is siloed. And what companies need now, in our opinion, is collaborative innovation. To work together, understand the language, and more importantly, the why of the person sitting across from you. If you're an engineer, you have to understand the why of design. Like all these tech companies now are buying entertainment companies. Some of them are falling apart. Like, look at the movie industry. Why did all of a sudden Netflix come along with a big bunch of checks, right? And they went and they bought all the content to put on their distribution. Why did the movie studios do it? They wanted to make their numbers. But they didn't really understand what was going on. And they gave away their customer. So now they're less valuable. than the tech company, than Netflix. The record industry, if you put it all together, it's not as valuable as Spotify. Spotify owns nothing. So all of that leans into why we built the school. In order to work in today's world, we believe you have to know how to innovate and collaborate in a collaborative way. And that's what the school is. And we did this 14 years ago. And now, fortunately, as President Kim will probably tell you, we're being copied in a lot of schools. It makes me and Dre feel really good.
There's I hear Dr. Dre might be here right now. And I'm curious, what was the initial conversation the two of you had? How did you guys describe the mission of this academy when you first came up with the idea?
Well, we look at, like, for example, when we did headphones, Dre called me up one day and said, all I can tell you is I'm working in the studio 24 hours a day. My kids are listening on these earbuds. The music sounds terrible. Then one day, because we communicate a lot and we bounce off each other, one day I'm walking down the beach. He had a house on the same beach, fancy. And but we both came from nothing and now we're here. So, so we're walking down the beach and Dre says to me, my lawyer wants me to sell sneakers. And I used the foul word. I said, Dre, no, not sneakers, speakers. People care about how you listen to music. And because there was a problem there, and so everyone said you can't sell headphones for $300. You can if you make them cool, because everybody else's headphones look like medical equipment. Right? So we found an angle and we built the biggest headphone company in the world. But that's because we weren't afraid of technology. We're not technologists, but we're not afraid of it. And most kids today that are growing up aren't afraid of it. But you can't, look, we plug into the zeitgeist. What's going on in young kids in the zeitgeist right now is they are living in a multidisciplinary world that their behavior is that. So you can't silo them. That 19 years old to 24-year-old period of time is very, very, very fertile. You can't just say, okay, you go to engineering school, and every now and then you could take a course in the arts. That's not it. And President Kim will expand on that, but that's basically it.
I'm going to fact check you really quick. Is that all true? The beach story? Okay. Tell us the truth here. Okay. We're going to talk. President Kim, you come to USC. This academy has existed for several years. How do you think about it? How do you approach it and carry this mission forward?
So first, let me say, the fact that you and Dr. Dre had the vision to create a school like this, when nothing like it existed before at the time. It's truly amazing. And yes, people are trying to copy it now. People are now talking, how do we collaborate better with industry? How do we change the educational model? How do we think beyond disciplines? You all envisioned that back in 2013.
Well, when you don't know how to do anything, you could do anything.
Well, but actually there was an important decision that was made. I don't know whether it was intentional or not, but the way that most organizations, most universities would have thought of this is, hey, great idea. You're going to offer us all this money. We'll take your money and we'll put your school inside engineering, inside business, inside the college. And I think that that would have been the kind of the playbook response, right? And the fact that we all together, USC and you and Dre, we said, you know what? If we want to make this thing really special, and if we want to do it the right way, then let's build it from scratch.
Yeah.
And we did that. And the result is that we didn't have to deal with a lot of the bureaucratic, administrative kind of push and pull that otherwise we built it the way we wanted.
We had a real champion in Max
totally
Lakias.
Innovative.
The president of USC at the time was a real champion, and he didn't want us part of another school. He said, this is a new type of education. This is the future of education. He just bought our stuff, you know? And USC's been fabulous. And now they put you in charge. That's going to make it even better for us. So we just think education needed to change. Everybody wants to work in education, but you need an idea. You can't change anything without an idea. Then you got to execute the idea. Everyone says, okay, we're going to build more schools. You don't need more schools. You need an idea. And we hit on it. Look, man, we don't know how we hit on it. We don't know how we do anything. But we did hit on it,
Well, and as you said, there are other schools that are trying to do similar things, but there's only one OG, and that's IYA.
Yeah.
And I want to just expand on a little bit of what you said, because the key foundational elements of your vision are now being proven to be probably the future of all of higher education. It's just a question of how we incorporate those principles. Number one, let's stop just talking in terms of disciplines. We have an English department, anthropology, and business. Why are we thinking just from our myopic disciplinary standpoint and not thinking from the product side, from the customer side, from the business side? That's where our kids are going to be getting jobs, and they don't want an English major to just do that, or a business major. They want someone who's going to be able to see the problem from the consumer.
Well, that's called empathy. You have to have empathy for the fellow disciplines. You have to understand the why of it. You have to understand why that designer thinks like that, because he's thinking of the customer. If you're the engineer and you think that, I don't know about you guys, but most of these companies are engineering societies. They rule. They talk over everyone's head, And, the engineering, I've always, what do I know? I told Max that the engineering degree needs to expand. It's not enough. By the way, you can't think that the other disciplines are fungible. But in the end, look what happened with AI. Some of those engineers are fungible, aren't they? So, you have to have a much broader base, no matter where you lean. If you lean design, you need to understand tech. You need to understand you can't just live in the world where you're so myopic that you can't learn like that.
I want to talk about AI in a second, but I'm curious, coming onto the campus, how have you seen the students react to this program?
They love it. They love it. And the reason they love it is, just to build on what you were saying, we're very intentional in saying this is not an interdisciplinary program, it's a transdisciplinary program. It truly transcends these disciplines, and there are a couple other elements that are necessary to make it really work so well for the students and for USC and for you, which is, first, we're beyond the disciplines. Number two, although we bring them all to bear on the problems we're trying to solve, number two, we've brought industry into the classroom. The way that the education works is that the students, from the very beginning, they're trying to solve real industry problems.
That's right.
So having that connection, getting exposed to the real world, and also building that pipeline for the students when they graduate. And then the third thing is what you started with, Jimmy, which is that it's all ultimately, look, with AI, technological skills are not going to be the big challenge anymore. It's going to instead, progress is going to be a function of, and it will be limited by things like creativity, things like collaboration, things like human values. And that's what really the Iovine Young Academy is trying to focus on. How do we instill those human team skills to solve any problem, no matter how hairy?
Well, every field is having that problem right now. I bet you everyone here works at a company or owns a company or whatever, but they all have the same problem. Every company has the same problem today, is that technology, the arts, design, they're all separate because they were siloed when they went to school.
I wanted to talk about AI, and I know that no one up here today has mentioned AI. So I thought we could break some ground here. But what is it about the philosophy of this academy that you think makes it even more urgent in the era of AI?
Well, I'd like the president to say something, because I've said too much.
Yeah, so look, AI is transforming every sector of our economy. Exactly what it's going to do to what classes of jobs, no one knows. my obligation as the president of a major university is to be thinking ahead of the curve about not how does a student get that first job after they graduate, because that job may disappear in a couple years. So yes, they need to get that first job, but we're thinking at USC about how do we instill in students the durable life skills, the tenacity, the resilience, the creativity, the collaboration that is going to allow them to advance their professional journeys no matter what happens to the job
But
market.
you see, Gus, we don't look at the macro, AI. We look at the micro. What's the problem we're trying to solve? We believe that siloed learning is a problem and is extinct. That's the problem with it. Applies to everything. It applies to AI. It applies to JI. It applies to everything. So it isn't about. It applies to medicine. And yeah, the world's getting more technologically advanced. Okay, no kidding. But if you're learning in a way that you can't take away from young people at 19 years old the way they live, who they are. And if you silo somebody, you send them to Wharton, and all they are is with 50 accountants every day, that's not good. I'm sorry, because that's why in every company, when the accountant walks in, people go, because they don't really understand instinctively why you're doing what you're doing. They were trained to just, you need to learn in a collaborative way. Then you can go do whatever you want to do, take higher education. But you have to learn. That's why we're building high schools. Look, and Dre knows this, I feel this way, I owe a lot to black culture. Right, so we're building high schools. We have 8 now in the inner cities because we want to give those kids an advantage. Because right now, what's going on in our country with diversity, et cetera, and affirmative action, these kids are going to need an advantage. And we feel, and because growing up in the inner city, which I grew up in, and Dre did, you grew up with superpowers because the cultures are still together in the inner city. So you have that advantage, And if you empower them with this type of learning, these companies are the schools are coming around now. Everyone wants to teach like this. The companies are going to demand their employees have this sort of collaborative innovation tools. So hopefully these young kids in the inner city that we're giving this education to will be very coveted by these companies. And so will the students at the graduate level.
Yeah.
There's no question that IYA has proven this model works. And I think that the opportunity and frankly the obligation now for other universities is to figure out how to take what we've learned from AOA, see the outcomes, the successes, and frankly incorporate some of these principles into the rest of our programs. And at USC, just to take the accounting example, so look, we're going to still need accountants, right? And at USC, we've actually made it really easy for that accounting major to also take classes and get a minor in stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
And if you think about an accountant who can make people laugh about a P&L, that's going to be a huge professional advantage, right? So,
no chance.
It's only funny if it's going really well, to be clear.
No chance of that.
I had the pleasure of visiting the Academy about 5 years ago, and it was amazing to see. And there was something about it that felt extremely human, even before AI became this big thing. And I know it was an unbelievable effort I've heard you went full Jimmy on building this thing. So what does the future look like from a USC perspective? And what is the future of not just this specific academy, but this philosophy look like from your perspective?
2 of the biggest schools in the country, and I will not mention their names because they were very honest about it, one raised $30 million, the other one raised $100 million to build they said from top to bottom what IYA is. So that, if you're like me and Dre, you feel good about that, but it also aggravates you. You know what I mean? Like more producers have copied Dre's style. You could only imagine. So that's a real compliment. But I'm not surprised this has taken off, and I'm thrilled about it, and we're humble about it. But I just think I don't know how many summers I have left. I'm 73 years old, right? No. But I think this is going to really take, and it's starting to take on.
Yeah, the model works. There's no question that it's spreading. Frankly, I think that's a good thing for society because we need more of these kinds of programs. And the fact that you and Dre are now extending it into high schools, that is incredibly beautiful and impactful. And I'm grateful to you for that. And I hope a lot of those high school students come to USC where they can continue that kind of education. But look, I actually think that even if they're not copying it, if they're innovating, that kind of innovation, that's good in higher education. We need to develop more models, more approaches. I think that our industry, it doesn't serve ourselves if we start thinking there's only one best university or best model, and let's try to rank everyone from 1 to
But
200.
Something, before you were at USC, they did research. They called 30 of the biggest companies in America. And they said, what do you want from our students? And number one came back, collaborative innovation. Mm-hmm. This is 5 years ago. So this is not something that's just happening in this little spot. It makes sense.
Let me say one more thing, which is about the human-centered education that students receive at IYA and at the rest of USC. That is so important. It's never been more important in this age of AI where, frankly, the technology is getting ahead of human values and governance issues. And we desperately, as a society, need more models, more schools like IYA to make sure that our students, as they're developing all of this technology, as they're improving the world, and as they're dealing with all these changes, that they're always keeping human agency at the very center of what we're doing.
Remember, this isn't a liberal arts school, because that's siloed learning,
Well, it's extraordinary. I think there's a clear pattern that when you and Dre walk on a beach, good things happen. And what you're doing is unbelievable. So thank you so much.
Dre sold his house, so I'm nervous nothing will ever happen again.
He's not on the beach anymore?
He's not on the beach anymore. This is a problem for the world.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, President Kim.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Welcome Governor Lesetja Kaganyago of the South African Reserve Bank and Alexis Akwagiram of Semafor.
Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, Governor. So obviously I wanted to start off by talking about the impact of the Iran war. We're looking at South Africa being Africa's biggest economy. We've had some breaking news that President Trump has said that Israel and Lebanon have announced a 10-day ceasefire. I'm wondering, just broadly speaking, how have you factored this into your monetary policy, and what does this latest news mean, if anything?
Well,
in essence, when you have news that would change the course of war, it has got implications for the oil price. The oil price is one of the key assumptions that we have to factor in. We have got a policy meeting coming in 3 weeks' time, and we will be firming up our assumptions in the next week or two. And so we will see how it affects the markets and how the markets react and before we sign off on our assumptions.
And then, seeing at the last MPC, you laid out your position. You had the baseline scenario, and then you had 2 other scenarios that were possible. Now, looking at it, in terms of the statements you've made, the suggestion is that maybe you're inclined to be proactive rather than just waiting for the inflation to kick in, and perhaps you would be proactive about raising rates. I mean, is that the case?
Well, proactive is not quite what we would do. Complacent is not what we are. And so what we are guided by is the outlook, the risks attended to that outlook, and the incoming data. And what matters when you have a shock like this is that classically you look through the shock and then respond only to second-round effects of that shock. The problem with this shock is that it's not just one shock. It seems to have a sub-shock. So the shock is directly through the oil price. We will feel the impact on the fuel price in South Africa. The second is the fertilizer prices. Now, in both instances, the prices matter. But what matters even more is whether you have access to the product in the first place. So the supply constraints in both of those commodities becomes an important thing. The impact of both would be felt in other prices, which then would characterize the second round effects. But for fertilizer, is directly into food prices. At the moment, the food prices in South Africa would not be affected because we have gone through our planting season, so we are getting into harvest. But in the second half of the year, when our planting season starts in October, November, it depends then on where the fertilizer prices would be, and that is how it would affect directly into food prices. And lastly, on food prices, global food prices. If global food prices rise, in spite of us running a bumper crop, our pricing will shift towards the international pricing. So we will have the product, but we would end up paying, the South Africans will end up paying more for it because the price is set internationally.
So the impact is going to be inflationary. What are your inflation expectations?
Well, in the adverse scenario, we had inflation still going towards closer to 4%, which our inflation target is 3%. We give it a tolerance of plus minus 1%, or should I rather say an intolerance, because when inflation then rises, we have got to rein it back to target. But that is in a scenario. But you set expectations, which is, I suppose you wanted to say more our forecast, because the expectations are a different matter altogether, because it's what the price setters expect to be. And that becomes complicated, because that is exactly what the central bank must react to, what the expectations of the price setters are, because that tells us that pricing has moved beyond the shock. For us as a central bank, our policy reaction function is to make sure that the impact of the shock is only transitory and not persistent, because if it becomes persistent, you run the risk of inflation expectations de-anchoring. And so as an inflation targeter, it is thus important to anticipate any evidence that might start emerging that would suggest that second round effects could kick in, and you react to that. You don't wait for the second round effects to arrive. By that time, it is too late. You must just look for pointers that the second round effects could kick in, that is what you react to.
So what policy levers are we talking about here? What policy levers would you pull in order to deal with this situation?
Well, we have one policy lever. It is the policy rate.
Yep.
That is what that is our primary tool. That is what we deploy whenever we are having to react to an inflation situation, whether inflation running away from target, whether it is deviating on the upper side of the target or on the lower side of the target.
So, I mean, previously you had been on the trajectory in terms of rate cuts. You've paused that. What new trajectory do you envisage in terms of rate cuts? And I mentioned before the possibility of rate hike. Where do you stand with that?
Well, I like the way you're talking like financial market analysts. What we were focused on... I
don't know if that's a compliment, but okay.
Well, what we were focused on was the disinflation process. We had undertaken monetary policy reform. We have got a new target. And what we were focused on is driving inflation toward that new inflation target. And the most recent reading said that inflation was at 3%, core inflation was at 3%, exactly where we wanted to be. And then the shock comes in. So now with inflation converging to target, we then had to assess what is the stance of monetary policy. And we characterized the stance of monetary policy to be in a restrictive territory. So with monetary policy restrictive and inflation on target, the correct thing to do was to adjust policy then to provide accommodation because inflation was on target. But we assessed the risks to inflation to be on the upside. And so we took a cautious approach of looking through and seeing what would actually emerge. And it was the stance we took in January. By the time we got into the March meeting, the shock had actually materialized. And so we took the rate cuts off the table.
And for the rest of the year, what do you think will happen? Will you remain cautious? What more?
For the rest of the year, monetary policy must do what it should be, and which is to be prudent. So we would remain prudent for the rest of the year. There are a lot of moving parts. What we can't afford is to have inflation expectations veering off target and thus leading into potentially higher future inflation going forward. And we remain focused on our primary mandate of reining inflation and making sure that inflation is on target, which is at 3%.
Okay. I wanted to talk about de-dollarization as well. I know South Africa is a member of the BRICS bloc, and other members of BRICS have been quite vocal about the idea of moving away from the dollar being the international currency of trade. Russia, for obvious reasons, has been vocal on that. Brazil has been particularly vocal on that. Where do you stand on this issue?
De-dollarization is not a term I would use. Part of it is that in the academic literature, the term is used for countries that had lost currency sovereignty and have thus been using the dollar for their domestic transactions. And when they're saying they are de-dollarizing, is that they are moving to their domestic currency. So it's not a term that I'll get to the point. Now it seems to be assuming a new meaning, which means looking for alternatives to the dollar. I participate in the BRICS forum of central bank governors. The drive is not about de-dollarization. The drive is about internationalizing our own currencies. That when a South African importer sources goods from Brazil, they take rands, they sell the rands and buy dollars. Then they take the dollars, sell the dollars and buy real so that they can settle their obligations with their Brazilian supplier. What we are actually doing, which is the next, is to get our payment systems interlinked so that you could actually facilitate trade, say, between South Africa and Brazil, that we can settle in our own currency. It takes away the frictions, because in that process of converting from rand to dollar and from dollar to real, you are actually, there is a margin, there are cuts in there, and you have got to go through a multiplicity of banks to arrive at that. So the focus is on getting trade settled in our own currencies rather than having to go through third currencies.
And so in terms of looking at that focus and actually achieving those goals, what practical steps are being taken?
Well, I'll give the example of Southern Africa. In Southern Africa, we have got a regional real-time gross settlement system. We have onboarded Southern African currencies. Understandably, the dominant currency is the rand, but it is exactly the same concept. Now, today, when you go to Botswana and you would like to withdraw money on an ATM in Botswana, the ATM would ask you, do you want rand or do you want the Botswana pula? And you then have a choice of that. That is where we are getting to. In the African continent, with the free trade agreement, we are facing exactly the problem that I was describing with Brazil. And so to facilitate intra-African trade, it is important that African countries get their currencies convertible so that we are able to settle African trade using our own currencies rather than going through third currencies.
And I know you're passionate about cross-border payments. I'm just thinking more broadly on the payments ecosystem within South Africa and also across borders. Fintechs and just the real advance of technology, so much has changed in banking. So where do you see the future of non-banks in terms of payment systems and being involved in cross-border payments?
I think that the bulk of the payments would still take place through the banks. But what the fintechs have done was to bring innovation. And so what we are doing now in South Africa, and we have got the regulatory framework now in place as part of our payment ecosystems modernization, is to allow non-banks to participate in our payment system. The big retailers are important players in domestic remittances and so forth. And it looks like in Southern Africa, they are also becoming important players in cross-border remittances. That is a service that normally would have been provided by the banks. Again, the retailer would have gone through the banks and through the banks get the money across. By becoming participants in the payment system, they can do this directly. That lowers the transaction cost and thus improves financial inclusion. And ditto for the fintech firms. And so what we are doing is to regulate by activity rather than by institution. So if you are a remittance provider, we will give you an opportunity to participate as a remittance provider. If you are a payments clearinghouse, we will facilitate you participating in the payment system as a payment clearinghouse. So it changes the entire ecosystem of the payment space.
And well, is that something you're looking to expand? Because it sounds like you're essentially knocking down the walls between some of these fintechs and banks.
Yes, we are. And so cross-border, what are we doing? So in Southern Africa, we have got a backbone called transactions cleared on an immediate basis. And so every country is developed or is developing fast payment systems. So what we are doing is getting the fast payment systems to interconnect, and basically with the transactions cleared on an immediate basis, it will offer somebody sitting in Zimbabwe or in Mozambique who is transmitting money from Mozambique to South Africa, or from South Africa to Mozambique, or from Mozambique to Zimbabwe, or the other way around, to have that money cleared on an immediate basis. That is where we are getting.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Governor, for your time. We appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Governor, thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Please welcome Leif Abraham of Public, Ben Miller of Fundrise, and Rohan Goswami of Semafor.
Leif, Ben, thank you so much for joining us. Ben, why don't I start with you? Can you explain for our audience here a little bit about what Fundrise is, what you do, sort of briefly?
Okay, so I co-founded Fundrise 15 years ago to democratize investing into alternative assets, private markets. We democratized investing into real estate over the first 10 years. We have 20,000 apartment units and a couple million customers. $5-6 billion real estate, and then we expanded to private real estate credit, and then we expanded to venture capital. We created the first public venture fund. So we have now a publicly listed venture fund that trades, ticker VCX. And our whole mission has been that the private markets have become an enormous part of the capital markets, arguably more important than public markets at this point in time when it comes to AI. And that division between public and private is a big problem for equity for the everyday investor.
Leif, give us a little bit about you.
Leif, co-founder of Public. We're a retail investing platform, and we're essentially building like the first agentic investing platform where you can use AI to basically automate most of your investing.
When we sort of got together a few weeks ago and were preparing for this, one of the things that struck me was that you both are sort of animated by similar principles, which is that there's a sort of fundamental spread and mismatch between what maybe really intense, really sophisticated institutional investors are able to do versus sort of the everyman or the layperson. And you guys both founded your companies some years ago now. The mission has basically stayed the same, even if, of course, as AI has become more of a factor in both of your investing styles. How do you think you're doing? Do you feel like the everyman has a fighting chance against sort of the very sophisticated, high net worth institutional investors here? Leif?
A lot to be built and done still. So far, I would not be satisfied. But I don't think there's a competition there. Like, I don't think a retail investor thinks about it as like, how do I stack up against the funds and
you don't think so?
Institutions and so on. No, I don't think so. And I think that's also because, like, as a retail investor, if you're truly a person that compounds their wealth over time, and you think about it as like, whenever I have some sort of liquidity, whenever the paycheck is coming, I put that into the markets. I like will want to compound my wealth. That your time horizon is way different. So like you're not thinking about the literal day-to-day movements necessarily. Like,
but there you're differentiating an investor from a day trader, right?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I would say so. But I would say like most people that build their portfolios are like investors, right? They're portfolio builders more than they're day traders.
Ben, your thoughts on how you're doing so far?
Well, it's funny. Like when we started the company way back when, we never imagined that we're on the cusp of artificial general intelligence, or whatever you want to call AI. And I believe that we're right at the knee of the curve, the exponential. I think we'll see AI break out into the public consciousness in a new way this year. And I think it's going to happen in the private markets.
Tell me why you think it's going to be this year, why things look different this year.
Well, it's very technical, and I'm ultimately like anybody's guess. We've talked to people at the AI labs. It seems like they're really worried. They're worried about it. They really feel like they're on the cusp. I was talking to one of my friends who works at one of these labs, and he said they thought at this point it would be a co-project with the government. And I was like, okay, that's serious. So, and I believe...
Meaning the development of whatever this greatest frontier model.
That AI would be in partnership with the government at this point in how far along it is.
And when you say it's supposed to move, or you expect it to move to the private markets, obviously, private credit itself, the concept came because banks couldn't finance in the wake of 2008 because there needed to be alternative, scalable, massive checks being cut. And to be sure, private equity firms, private credit firms are sitting on still record amounts of dry powder. But there's a massive difference between what the private markets can do versus what the U.S. government can do. If we are talking about some sort of Manhattan Project style project for AI. This has been more of a tension with defense tech, but do you feel like private credit investors, especially given the ructions we've seen over the last few months with Blue Owl or Blackstone or who have you, do you feel like they are equipped to actually be scrupulous, diligent investors in sort of pressure testing where they should be deploying capital?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question.
Sure. Do you think it's a private market's job? Do you think the private markets are set up to actually deeply interrogate these massive checks that have to be cut and make good decisions about them?
Yeah, I mean, the private markets are superior to public markets when it comes to that. If anybody's been a public investor and a private investor, you get way more information as a private investor, way more. You get cohort data, you get all the data you possibly could ever want in the private markets. In public markets, you actually get very little. You get some public filings, but essentially the companies can't give you deep inside information because it'd be non-public information. So actually the private markets are way better off for funding this from an information point of view. From a duration point of view, I also think that the public markets they struggle with long-term investments, and they're much more focused on yield and short-term outcomes. And so I think private markets, not only are they better set up to fund what's about to happen, what's been happening, but they actually are superior in most ways.
A lot of the problems that I'll pick on Blue Owl, unfortunately, that Blue Owl is facing and these other firms are facing is because they've pushed very aggressively in recent years towards a retail audience. Now, of course, that's not retail in the conventional sense. These are still affluent, accredited investors. But that's sort of your neighborhood. Last time you and I spoke, it was people who are wealthy and well-to-do, but maybe not tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you have any plans to start offering private market assets on your platform? Do you already do that?
We don't yet offer private markets. We dabbled a little bit in it in the past with through Reg A+, there's like a regulatory framework we can basically turn any private asset into like a mini public company, so to say.
Okay.
But that instrument, for example, just didn't really work because there's a lot of restrictions around it. It's like
when you're sitting where you are and you're talking to investors, do you feel like it's something you want to get into?
No, 100%. We get the question all the time, but for us the issue is that we haven't found the real instrument really that can really unlock the access for retail investors to private markets. And I think the one argument that Ben makes around that in the private markets you actually potentially have more information about companies because if you have a big investor you can see cohort data, all that kind of stuff. That is generally true, but you have to have the leverage as an investor to get that information in the first place. And if you're a retail investor, in most cases, you would not actually have access to that information. And there's no regulatory framework of why, of where companies have to give you this information. And there's no standardization around those disclosures anyway in any regard. And so I think it becomes very hard for actual retail investors to really make very good informed decisions. And so I think there has always been a little bit this with private assets going to broad retail. There's always been this issue around the quality of the asset. Is the retail investor really getting the quality, piece of the access to the fund, the quality asset of the private company, or are they just getting a little bit the leftover crumbs where we're now going to go very broad and we're going to give them what's the institutions didn't want to pick up.
I mean, there is a broad consensus, I think, Ben, to your point that to really achieve uncorrelated or outsized returns, you need to have some exposure to the private markets, even if you're just a regular investor. But Life, to your point, there is also sort of an asymmetry in I hate the word sophisticated in this case, but non-sophisticated investors' ability, even if they have that information, to fully understand, comprehend, diligence that information. That's the perception anyways. And you see that in the fact that these so-called liquid funds, I would argue, that aren't really liquid at all, experience sort of outsized redemption when it's not correlated at all to the actual fund's performance. The SaaSpocalypse triggered a broader sort of exodus. Ben, do you think there is an education problem with quote-unquote retail investors, the people who you're raising money for? Do you feel like they understand the assets and why you're investing in them?
So that's not how I think about the problem, and I think that's how the press has framed it, but it's actually not what's happening. So all the capital let's talk private credit for a minute because it's been the poster child of this, but this is I've seen this cycle over and over again. Private credit, retail investors have never heard of Blue Owl. There's no I want Blue Owl, give me Blue Owl, right? What's happening is that a major wealth manager, like a big investment bank, Bank of America, will make a deal with Blue Owl. The investment committee at Bank of America will approve a Blue Owl fund. They'll recommend it down to a financial advisor, and the financial advisor will either buy it on behalf of their client or recommend it to the client. The client probably has very little involvement, and so the actual channel how Blue Owl or any other private credit makes its way to retail investor is through highly sophisticated, highly structured, highly regulated processes. Then when it blows up, they say retail investors. So it's a false narrative that's designed basically to encourage this idea, which I saw in 2008. It's a false idea. Big investors are not more sophisticated. AIG went bankrupt. Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. Every single big investor claims to be more sophisticated than retail investors. I think it's much more complicated than that. It's not actually like that's. They're selling that narrative to get paid to be managed other people's money.
Sorry, they meaning the financial advisors.
Financial institutions are trying to get you to buy their service, which is that you're not sophisticated and you need my help, that's the story that is generally sold and mostly bought by media.
I'll take that criticism on the nose. Then, Leif, do you agree with Ben's assessment here? Do you agree with him?
I generally agree that this notion that retail is a dumb money, I think, is wrong, and that retail is way more sophisticated and smart than people might first think. I think specifically the so to say younger generations, like millennial type of people that grew up with the internet around, grew up with way more financial literacy than previous generations, just due to information access, social media, I run an investing platform, right? So there's communities on dividend investing with millions of people behind, and I'm like, how much can you talk about dividend investing? But it goes as narrow as that, right? And so there's so much more information there, and people were also growing up with more access to these financial products, right? Lower account minimums, KYC that works immediately, where you don't have to fax a form over to your banker or something, etc. And so these people just grew up kind of self-directed first. They grew up in the markets much more and much earlier in their lives, and therefore they're way more confident in their abilities as investors and also recognize that it's not necessarily rocket science.
I just want to add, I think that we're talking about the past. If you look at the present, and within 180 days, most every person who's making decisions is going to be made as a co-pilot with AI. Any investor today is using AI to help make the decisions. I believe that AI is generally better than the average sophisticated institutional investor, less conflicted, and so intelligence is being democratized. And if we don't talk about where it's going, within a year, the most advanced models will probably be as good or better than certainly than the average financial advisor, the average financial investor, and retail will embrace it in a way that the institutions won't. Institutions will be, because it's going to threaten their existence.
Sure.
So I think the idea that retail is less sophisticated, certainly there's been instances of it, but I think it's basically an anachronism.
Let's actually turn to AI and how you're applying it in the way that you invest, because real estate, especially commercial real estate, is one of the few businesses or few sectors, I should say, where there are immense amounts of proprietary data hidden behind any one of these providers, whether it's CoStar or what have you, that offer a real advantage to people willing to pay for them. How do you democratize access to that? Is it just something where you, as the fund manager, say, no, you trust me, I have access to information, and I've run models on it, and here's why? Or is there a push to actually put that data in the hands of your LPs and of sort of everyday investors who are working with you?
So one of the projects we've been working on for the last 3 years is we built something called Real AI, realai.com, and it's a AI real estate analyst that has access to more real estate data than probably any source of real estate out there, certainly any person, any institution. And then we built essentially a lot of infrastructure around it. And so it's a metaphor for what's going to happen. The real estate AI analyst is superior to any ordinary person doing real estate analysis. And it's only, once we get on Mythos, the next model, I mean, we're going to see white-collar labor displaced by an AI co-pilot. And the way you embrace it is by building good data infrastructure, building good AI orchestration so that you're making better decisions with less people.
Private markets, for the time being, are far less regulated than assets that trade on the public markets. And Leif, you and I have talked at length before about your thoughts on regulation as actually a potential force for good, or being regulated as a potentially good thing. But I'm curious, as you start to roll out AI products that actually deploy capital on behalf of users that are making investing decisions, who bears that liability? Who gets sued if things go wrong? If the AI bot triggers something and wipes out someone's entire portfolio. What is the end user's recourse? Are we at a point right now where there isn't a framework yet? And should there be one to protect them?
So we just launched AI agents for investing. And the way we did it was essentially to separate the reasoning from the execution.
Okay.
And when I say it like that, it means that the agent can only do things that you told it to do and cannot deviate from that. And so there is no actual own decision making. And I think right now when people think about AI agents, they will think about OpenClaw. They will think about, you don't want to have it go rogue, so I'm going to put it on a little Mac Mini and I'll put it into this isolated environment far away from my data because I'm scared, and that's where it is right now because that's what people think about the rogueness of an agent, right? And I think no one's going to trust for OpenClaw to just run your investing tomorrow.
Sure.
Even though you can at public, by the way, just saying if you want to try out. But long story short, no one's really going to trust that, right? And so in order to build the trust also for these systems, I think it's very important that you have very clear transparency of what are the actions it can do and very clear control over it only doing the actions that you told it to do.
But let me push you a little bit there, just because we are rapidly moving, it feels like, to a world where everything is agents talking to agents, right? Where whoever wins the sort of consumer AI model battle, whether that's Anthropic or OpenAI or whatever Elon is doing, that will be the sort of stepping stone for most people to engage in e-commerce, to trade, to make decisions. Why build an in-house product when theoretically it would be much easier, much simpler, and probably a lot more lucrative to simply build an API or a connector that allows any of these models to talk to and interrogate, so that when you get to the point that you are executing trades, or when AI is executing trades for you, you don't have to deal with sort of duplicating the efforts that much larger, much more sophisticated AI firms are already able to do.
I think there's a few pieces here, number one, data and the quality of the data, right? If your AI agent makes a decision based off a 2-week-old Yahoo Finance article, good luck. And so the data has to be, a true real data source. And so in our case, for example, again, this reasoning is separated from the actual, call it decision tree of where the trading executes. And so all the data sources are plugged into this more kind of stringent model there. And
are those entirely proprietary data sets though, or are they sort of?
No, it's also it's NASDAQ data and stuff even.
Sure.
And so on. But it's the data set that you would also usually make your trading decisions on and so on, right? So that's that piece. And then the second piece is also just the actual rails of the execution as well, right? So if you right now, for example, just take your API keys from a public account and you throw it into an OpenClaw and you tell it to execute a certain strategy, you will not have real-time execution, et cetera, et cetera. And so there is something about it happening within your authenticated environment of a brokerage account with the data sources you can trust, and also just from a speed of execution, just security of that it happens within that authenticated environment versus just someone running rogue on the internet.
Let's switch gears for a second here, Ben. And I want to sort of get your perspective on the real estate market right now. Commercial real estate, office real estate is sharply bifurcated. The markets, of course, have been incredibly volatile, and rates are still quite high. So where are the levers where you can create value and find value in such a pressured environment right now? How are you thinking about that?
Well, personally, I believe we're going to see a massive economic shock from the war in Iran. That probably hits in September, October.
Why such a delay?
Just the nature of supply chains and how it works its way through Asia and how long it takes for ships to get here. And so there's a big economic shock coming. I've been around, I've seen enough to know that usually there's consequences. And so and what gets us is the second order consequences. You don't realize that there's some big company that's actually exposed to it. And so Lehman Brothers wasn't an obvious downstream consequence of subprime. AIG, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, you don't know who's overextended during a period of pressure, but usually someone's overextended. For us in real estate, I think inflation is likely to go much, much higher for some brief amount of time. That's going to cause a lot of stress. And so I think that you're going to see, there's been a strained economic environment for real estate for the past 3 or 4 years. So I think you'll see certain players actually break during this process, and that breakage causes potential cascade risks. So I think that we're going to go through a very tumultuous period starting sometime, I think, in the fall. And that's an opportunity. I mean, there's an opportunity if you're liquid, you're low leverage, you're sort of expecting it. But it's there's no question that we're not going to get out of this thing with zero impact on the real economy.
On that cheery note, we will have to leave life. Ben, thanks so much for your time today.
Welcome Dan Clancy of Twitch and Max Tarney of Semafor.
Dan, thank you so much for doing this. We have a very smart, well-informed audience here at Semafor World Economy, so they all know what Twitch is and how it works. But I think a lot of people know, if they know about Twitch, they know about it as a streaming platform for essentially watching people play video games. That was at least how I first kind of learned about it. How much of Twitch is still streaming video games versus streaming other types of content? There's a lot of other kind of streaming that's happening on Twitch as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It started out, if you go back in time when Twitch was founded, it was founded as Justin TV. And at Justin TV, it had this concept of life casting, of streaming your life. It gained some traction, but really Twitch took off when they pivoted and focused on video games. And it's really kind of come full circle, where now, if you can think of it, somebody's streaming it. And whether it's someone fishing, musicians are streaming, athletes, all sorts of stuff. And I think it comes down to, it's important to understand what makes Twitch different. Because I often joke, I expect there'll be an announcement that McDonald's is starting a live streaming service, because it seems like every day someone is starting a new live streaming service. And I think what Twitch does is very different. I use the phrase community-centric live streaming. That's because when people come to Twitch, we design it focused on people, as I say, pulling up a chair and hanging out for a while. It's not just put in your feed as yet another thing to watch while you're swiping to the next thing. And the end result, because people stay for a while, the average length of time someone watches a Twitch stream might be 73 minutes, whereas the average length of time someone might watch live streaming on TikTok might be 73 seconds. And when you stay for a while, what happens, because we have chat that moves along, because I suspect many of you know what Twitch is, but really haven't been on Twitch or haven't spent a lot of time on a channel. And what happens is, as you spend time chatting, you kind of start to create connections, okay? And you start to recognize each other. And the people say, hey, where you been? What's going on? And you build this sense of belonging. And the streamer starts recognizing you from your name. And so it builds community. And a lot of people talk about community in the online world, but I actually don't think they use it right. Because I think community is having a sense of belonging, and I think you get that by shared experiences.
What's the distinction? Why do you think that they get wrong? Is it just that it's that there's this two-way street? Is that kind of what you're
talking about? I think people
about?
like using this word to say, oh, we're community, and all it is people yelling at each other in comments, okay? And that's not a community. If you think back to what creates a community for us, whether it's a church or whether it's a running club or whether it's a sports club or whatever, it's this sense of connection. And this sense of feeling like you have a sense of belonging. And I think biologically, that sense of acceptance of who you are comes from shared experiences.
Yeah, I want to talk about the chat in a little bit. I want to kind of circle back, but I want to kind of lay the foundation here. Amazon, which owns Twitch, sadly does not break out Twitch's financials for curious media reporters like me. Would love to see that happen. But how does Twitch actually make money? And how much of the money comes from advertising revenue versus membership or subscription? Like, how does that kind of break down?
How does it work? And in fact, it's the thing that's so surprising for people because that sense of connection and belonging, over like 3/4 of our money comes directly from the viewers' pockets, where they are supporting the creators they are attached to and they love. And they do that, the basic form is what's called a subscription. When you subscribe, it's not for access to content because it's all free. When you subscribe, it's really for kind of status in the community. It's an act of patronage to show that you support this person and then other people acknowledge you. And then you also can do what's called gift subs. And what that is where, suppose I want to give you $50 as a creator.
That sounds awesome.
So hold on a second. What I do is I buy 10 subscriptions for other people that are watching you. And it's this wonderful psychological thing because while I'm giving you the money, everyone feels like I'm giving it to them. And so when I do it, they all go, oh,
yeah.
Right? And now I feel good. It's kind of like if you watch a street musician and you put some money in, and everyone who's watching got a little something.
Can I just ask, how is there someone who has the record for buying the most, subscriptions?
For getting the most subs. So Kai Cenat set the record last year during his Mafia-thon, where he went over 1 million subscriptions.
Wow. So wait, but what about people giving them out? Like,
well, that included, meaning one person giving out. No, so he received, that included lots of people giving out.
Wow.
We don't know who the record is of the person that has given the most subscriptions. I think some people wouldn't necessarily want us to be going around saying, hey, this guy.
Yeah.
So it's really more at the creator level. And many of those 1 million subscriptions were these gift subscriptions.
Yeah.
Where strong patrons would come and give those subscriptions to the community.
So you said in an interview last year that you didn't want to discuss profitability, but that was last year. So, we're now that you're in the
You got to roll the dice.
This year, maybe, Are you guys profitable?
I do not talk about whether or not we're profitable. Here's the way I would describe it, though. I think it was really important to us to demonstrate what I call is the viability of the business, okay, meaning that it works. And I was at YouTube back in 2010 to 2012, and at that point it wasn't profitable, but we knew the business worked, and we feel very good about where we're at right now in terms of showing that, this business works in terms of balancing your costs, the amount, because a significant portion of our revenue goes to creators, and so we're in good shape with respect to that.
So you mentioned YouTube. I want to ask about YouTube. I think probably a lot of people have noticed we're streaming this live on YouTube. YouTube is really getting into live streaming pretty heavily at the moment. I think about this, one of my favorite creators or podcasters online is I'm a Los Angeles Lakers fan, and the podcast and one of my favorite Lakers podcasters basically has started going live after every game on YouTube. He engages with the chat just like what you're talking about, reading some of the comments, reacting. I even at this point as a listener and a viewer recognize some of those commenters as well who do kind of super chats or whatnot. Why, given how large YouTube is relative to other streaming platforms, why would a creator stay or start on Twitch rather than starting on YouTube?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in general, I think the limiting factor for us has been we want live streaming to grow. I think mistakenly, sometimes we thought there's a competition. Don't think there's a competition at all. As more people get into live streaming, it's good for us. The difference is, and most people can understand this easily if I talk about TikTok, with TikTok, if you're watching a live stream, you're going to swipe because you get a little bored. Even on YouTube, there's candy in the bottom right called related videos. I joked with T-Pain, who streams on Twitch a lot, and I said his biggest challenge on YouTube is this guy named T-Pain. Because he has a lot of really good videos in the bottom right that you get a little bored and your eyes wander and you click. Okay.
Yeah.
On Twitch, when you're on a channel watching someone live, we don't try to get you to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
The key is that's what builds the community. Okay, because live streaming sometimes gets boring. That's okay.
Yeah.
You stay, you hang out, you build the connection. Okay,
Yeah.
And we had a ton. YouTube at one point was targeting Twitch, and they recruited a bunch of our creators by paying them a lot more than what they would organically make. every single one of them came back to Twitch. And they all said, because the community is different. I think YouTube is also a great live streaming platform. It fits for different types of content. But when you're really trying to build that connection, you want people that are pulling up a chair and staying for a while.
Just out of curiosity, how are most people, are they watching Twitch also on on their laptop, on a desktop computer? Is it, YouTube has talked a lot about, YouTube on physical televisions, people who, pull it up and just have, videos going, kind of forever. They've really highlighted the growth of that area. Where are people actually watching Twitch? Is it on their phone?
So it is, so we have TV apps, we're on the phone, we're everywhere. It's still, if you look at percentage of hours watched that people spend, it's predominantly on laptops, desktops, PCs, something like that. Although that's been growing on the phone, okay, but and growing on the TV. But it's still the majority of it is on their TV or laptop or desktop. If you look at the people, it's more 50-50. In other words, the sessions on your phone tend to be shorter. But so there are a lot of people that absolutely watch it on their phone. They don't spend as much time.
Yeah.
In part because their phone is always trying to distract them.
Yeah. You mentioned the chat before, and I have noticed this. One of the things that almost all Twitch streamers, all successful Twitch streamers do is engaging with the chat, like you're saying, talking to people who are kind of talking back, which is really cool on the one hand and does build that kind of community. On the other hand, not all the comments that end up there are always great. I've read comments about myself online. Sometimes doesn't make me feel amazing, sadly. Do you ever get concerned about the impact of the comments on streamers, even ones that are allowed by the community guidelines? Do you ever think what it's doing to some of these people that they're reading all of,
Well, so not only do I think about it, I experience it.
Yeah.
So I stream myself. I do a lot of different things. One thing I do is I do music when I stream. But here's the difference, and you talked about social media. So if I post something on some other social media platform, since I'm kind of out front, I'm going to have lots of trolls that are going to say snipey things, because it all takes about 3 seconds for someone to say something pissy. When I'm streaming, I don't get much of it at all, because they actually don't want to sit there and watch me for an hour. And so what happens is, it may be sometimes there's a little pissy statement, but then it just flies by, okay? If they keep making these statements, we spent a lot of time making it so that you can control who's in your room listening. You can go ahead and ban them and say, I don't need this person watching me, okay? And we have a lot of ways to do verification so they don't pop right back. So interestingly, while it's certainly an issue, okay, it is so much more of an issue when you think of other forms of social media, because the detractors that want to say something, it takes them no time.
Yeah. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you as I was preparing for this was about the streamer Clavicular, who's a big Kick Looksmaxer streamer. Maybe I'm just saying words, and you guys can look them up afterwards. But one thing that was in the news yesterday was, unfortunately, there was a story that he had overdosed. And he said in the aftermath of that he's not going to do any more what he calls IRL streaming, where camera person follows him around, because of this, and that it had created a kind of a scary set of habits for him, and it wasn't healthy anymore. I'm kind of curious, do you think there is any danger or any downside to these people who are going around streaming for hours, in real life, having cameras follow them around for 8 or 9 or 10 hours a day? How do you think about that?
So with him, I think it's a little different, because he was always trying to create some drama, some stunts, and he wasn't just being authentic. Okay, and again, he's not on Twitch. Not disappointed in that. I think so. In general, if you're there being authentic, right? I think that's a little different. Okay, but I do think, having done a lot of IRL streaming myself, I think you do need to be aware of it and determine when's the right time and when's not the right time. And I do think people sometimes are doing something and they don't understand that moderation, sometimes is good. But in general, it's not as big of an issue for a lot of Twitch streamers, although I'm not saying that it doesn't mean it's not an issue.
Yeah. Got two more for you as we're running out of time. One is, I'm sure you've been aware that one of your biggest streamers, Hassan Piker, has been in the middle of this weeks-long debate inside the Democratic Party about whether people should go on his stream, as more politicians do go on Twitch. I saw Gavin Newsom was gaming on there somewhat recently. I mean, you've obviously dealt at various times with Hassan Piker. You guys have, you guys have taken him off the platform. He's kind of come back on, temporarily kind of suspended him. What's your perspective as you kind of watch this play out? Do you think that people are kind of misunderstanding, or anybody in the Democratic Party is kind of misunderstanding his audience or his kind of popularity there? What do you think as you're watching this debate?
Yeah. So look, I don't have an opinion on any particular streamer. I think it's absolutely the case that one of the challenges when you're live streaming is you're up there and you say a lot. And when you say a lot, especially as you're more inflammatory, you might say a lot of things that are over the top. Now, for us, the way we handle that is we have a very clear set of community guidelines where we do not allow certain type of behavior. If you violate that, then we take enforcement actions and we suspend you. It's designed not to kick you off forever. It's designed to say, no, you're going to have a suspension whenever Hassan has stepped over the line. We've taken action. And it's interesting now because those folks will get worked up from both the right and the left on this because we have also conservative people that are saying certain things that some people don't like. And one of the things that kind of works well on Twitch is if you don't like what someone's saying, then don't go and listen to them.
Yeah, right.
And then it's not in your face at all, literally.
Yeah.
It doesn't get injected into like, you got to go see it.
Totally.
No, you disagree. And so in general, we think it is important for us to allow people to express themselves.
Last one for you before we totally run out of time, which is, what is the one thing that you're working on right now on Twitch that you guys are building and working on that's really exciting you?
The one thing that comes to mind right now is we're really working on helping our creators make it easier to create short-form content from their streams. A big thing that's very popular is clips, and you make clips. And for big creators, they have teams that do it, but for smaller creators, so we're using a lot of technology to make it easy so you can get the highlights from a stream, and then you can share them on third-party social media.
Well, Dan, I'm sure we'll be sharing and watching a lot of these clips in the coming days and forever, I guess. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Please welcome Roham Garagozlu of Dapper Labs, Chris Walters of Finastra, and Rohan Goswami of Semafor.
We're going to try to keep this straightforward. Rohan, and Chris. Chris, we'll start with you, actually. Can you tell us a little bit about Finastra and what you guys do and where you guys sit?
Sure. So we're one of the largest private companies that provides mission-critical software to banks worldwide. So we have a few major business units. One is a lending business unit that lots of the critical software to drive lending operations we offer. So everything from a very prominent loan servicing platform called LoanIQ, which about 70% of all syndicated loans in the world are serviced on that platform, to loan document creation and management solutions. We have a payments business, a payments hub, which is effectively, it directs payments for banks all over the world. So we direct about 7 trillion in payments a day. So many of the largest banks in the world use us. And then we also have a core banking business, which is, core banking is literally tracking every transaction that occurs at a bank. So really the system of record.
Roham?
I run a company called Dapper Labs. We're a private company, technology company, building on the intersection of entertainment and finance. So most of the last few years, we've been partners with the NBA, the NFL, and Disney. We built their digital asset platforms. They process over $1.5 billion or so in sales. And now our new product is called Peak Money. And what we're doing is basically building a new kind of finance application for people that we feel the traditional finance system hasn't been able to serve yet. So our vision is to make wealth creation as fun as playing a game, and I'm excited to talk about that.
Crypto and private markets, two areas that have seen absolutely no news whatsoever for the last 6 or 7 months. Chris, I want to start with you. We were talking about this backstage. In addition to servicing and actually shaping these loans and these facilities, you yourself, your firm, was the largest ever private credit deal. I think $5 billion we were talking about backstage?
Just north of $5 billion, yeah.
Which is massive and crazy. You guys have refinanced since then. Sitting where you are now, both as a vendor to these folks, but also as a beneficiary of this market at one time, what is your perspective on what we've seen unfold, not just with software loans, but sort of broadly across the private credit space over the last 6-7 months?
Look, the market exploded over a number of years, and it was driven by a need that banks weren't servicing. And so it provided...
Couldn't service.
They couldn't service, right? So they weren't and couldn't. And ultimately that need was significant, which is why they grew so rapidly. What I would say is a little bit like the software markets, right? The way the market is looking at private credit today is almost consistent across all portfolios. The reality is there's some incredible strength in many of these portfolios, but there's real concern. I think one of the things that exacerbated some of the fears, there's more retail investors who are in the products. There's BDCs, and even some of the existing private credit firms have come up with solutions where you can redeem a portion of your investment. When you have more retail investors in, that leads these assets to be a little bit more jittery. And so I think there's a lot of quality, right, in the private credit portfolios, but there's a ton of anxiety in the market. And certainly some of the things that were more extreme that occurred, like offering loans based on ARR covenants, right, that was pretty adventurous. That leads to higher risk versus, profit-driven covenants.
Let me sort of push at your business model for a second. My colleague Liz, on stage here, I think yesterday, spoke with Orlando Bravo, who's Thoma Bravo's model, like most software roll-up models, is under a lot of pressure right now, in part because the playbook for your owners is pretty simple. Cut costs, increase prices every single year, and then sell the thing or float the thing. Mm-hmm. And AI has sort of upended the value proposition of every software business, even if there are pockets of great quality assets, as you said. You carry a heavy debt burden. You have a PE owner in Vista. Mm-hmm. Do you feel constrained in your ability to respond or be flexible when it comes to investing in AI?
Interestingly, we don't feel constrained at all. So we just recently announced an AI Center of Excellence where we had so many people doing work across our portfolio. We have about 5,000 members of our team, and I feel like a healthy share of them were all doing something related to AI. We were putting tools in their hands, giving them tons of education. But the reality is we needed to have a more devoted set of people that was focused on both delivering value for our customers as well as our team with AI. And so adding 150 people fully devoted to it in a short period of time, that's not a small investment. And we're also bringing tons of tools and training to our team. And so we're investing quite aggressively. I'd also say we benefit a great deal. Our investor, like Thoma, Vista, invest primarily in software businesses. They have built an incredible collection of talented people at the center that can actually help us as we invest, and even partnerships with some of the biggest providers in the industry.
Rome, it's your turn to get pressed a little bit. And crypto, had a great moment du jour, let's say, early last year. It stalled out a little bit. And your new venture, it seems to me, is sort of striking at something which I've always found interesting, which is that Americans don't actually want a super app the way that Asian investors might, or even Latin American investors might. They seem almost content in not really having a great grasp on their finances. If you look at all the neobank entrants that have tried and failed in this country, all the super app entrants that have tried and failed in this country, why do you think that you have an edge where those guys didn't?
Well, all we're doing is we're trying to make it simple. We're trying to make a sharp experience that's actually enjoyable for people to engage in and speaks to the next generation, not in terms of the same kind of stories that have been told growing up, because the financial system is not working for the next generation. Making 10% year over year, putting your money in a savings account, they're not even interested in that. So we want to package up asymmetric opportunities, but
Like
make it...
what kind of opportunities?
Effectively, we built a wrapper around everything you hear in decentralized finance, all of these yield products, all of the, even sort of the trading, decentralized trading, et cetera. We're making it super seamless and easy, the same way we did with NFTs and crypto asset trading for the NBA and NFL.
You know, cynics, and far be it from a reporter to be cynical, might point out to you that a lot of people lost a lot of money in NFTs, in crypto, a lot of young people who didn't fully appreciate and fully understand
100%.
the complexities of the assets they were investing in, or even sort of the rules of the game. And so is there not a risk then there, and I am pushing you here, that you're simply selling something to these people that they don't fully grasp and they might, to use their parlance, get the rug pulled out from underneath them?
Look, I mean, the reality is that the financial system, and when it comes to speculation and entertainment, that's already how, whether it's sports betting, whether it's prediction markets, whatever it is, people are looking for these asymmetric opportunities that are often difficult to parse. Hey, what's actually happening under the hood? And so we think our philosophy is just make everything transparent. And with the rise of AI, everyone will have their own personal agents that can construct personalized portfolios to them. They can construct investment instruments that would otherwise be, you would need to have a whole team managing it, or you would have to have a hedge fund, or you would have to have special access. We can make those opportunities available to folks with a click. And the reality is today, we're not actually talking about crypto. Vast majority of our users now, the products in testing, are coming in with stable coins and with tokenization and real world assets. They may want to invest in private credit or other forms of yield that aren't driven from crypto. And the crypto side of it, what we call tokenization, that just enables developers like us to build simpler and more faster moving, easier to use applications for consumers.
Let's talk about scale here. And Chris, I do want to talk. Scale is not your problem. I think most of the world's banks rely on you. But Roham, you are competing with the likes of Coinbase or even Stripe, massive fintechs that can throw tens of millions of dollars and hundreds of bodies into building these platforms that have the added advantage of name recognition and deep penetration. So how do you actually break into a space that you're just trying to enter that does have people who, if they wanted to, could just decide to start doing it basically overnight?
Well, I think everybody, I don't think we're competing with any of those providers. You can use Stripe to get money into our product. You can transfer money in from Coinbase. Coinbase can wrap around our yield sources just as easily as we can serve their customers. I think we're entering a world where software is composable, and you're already seeing with our AI tools, the customer will go to one interface, but on the back end, they're touching 50 different products made by 50 different companies. And that's just the way that the cookie's crumbling. And the reality is for us, we just want to be that customer interface. And whether it's tapping into the on-ramps and off-ramps that already exist, or the instruments that others are creating and tokenizing on-chain. Most of the tokenization of real-world assets, we're not touching. It's happening from Fidelity and BlackRock and whatever it is. We just build a software wrapper around it. You can think of our product as a non-custodial wallet that just has a beautiful interface, and everything under it can be apps and assets developed by other people.
I do think this is an overused word, and then I promise I will stop pushing you on this. But
please.
But what I'm still not clear on what your moat is here, right? I mean, if you are just a wrapper for other people's products, then what is to stop anyone, whether it is a Fidelity or it's a Coinbase or it's a Franklin Templeton, from spinning up their own wrapper for said products?
Two things. One is the user experience. I think we've proven millions of times that we can
Does that matter if things are going to be agentic, though? I said I was going to stop pushing you in here.
Well, user experience can be agentic, absolutely. How do you make a product service agents just as well as consumers? That's the whole thing. Ergonomically setting up your product so that agents can tap into it so it makes sense to people that aren't actually looking at an interface. That's a huge part of things. And our product, basically we built a set of Lego blocks that agents can come and construct into new instruments and products and services for customers. And then the other underlying thing, which I don't usually like talking about blockchain to a sort of normie audience, but we built a platform called Flow.com. It is a fully scalable solution that has automation built into the core, so we can do things much more cheaply, much more openly. And the whole point is, why would an agent choose that? Is because they can audit it from A to Z, because it's not actually in our control. It's practically free. They can interface with it at any time. And it's sort of the next level of open source, which means the actual state is open for anybody to build on top of. So To me, that's the advantage. Is A, we figured out how to build user experiences that no one else can. Our products are, the Stripe is a business to developer company, and others use their products to build beautiful interfaces. That's what we're doing. But the other advantage that we have is we have core infrastructure that can do things that other folks can't. But that doesn't mean that we're the only ones that can use it. Anybody can tap into it. Anybody can build products on top of it. And it's fully interoperable with both TradFi, where people can withdraw stablecoins from their banks and their PayPal accounts and whatnot. And it's fully interoperable with the rest of crypto, Ethereum, Bitcoin, whatever it is. And we were just talking about this, everybody's talking about tokenization, but everyone talks about it as, hey, cut costs and have 24/7, 365 a day trading. People don't talk about it as, hey, now these assets are programmable, and now any developer can come and build any kind of application on top of it. I think the future interfaces and experiences for finance are going to look very different. This is the last thing I'll say. Interfaces are all going away, whether it's SaaS, whether it's whatever. Everything is going to be agentic except entertainment and gaming. People who want to have fun, want to be in a different world. And so what we do, that intersection of like, how do you tickle someone's sort of hobbies and passions while at the same time getting them to make money, is very important. Kids these days, they don't want to spend their time on something and then go spend their money on something else. They want to make their money and their passion in the same place.
I'm still stuck on you calling me a normie, but I appreciate.
At least I didn't say muggle.
Fair enough. Chris, let's talk about your business, because look, you have penetrated and are in the back offices of it seems like every major financial institution on the planet. But I really can't believe I'm about to ape Roham's point. You are TradFi. You are the conventional sort of legacy provider. And lest I be accused of being a shill for the banks here, stablecoins and those rails are widely regarded within the banks, by the big financial institutions, as a legitimate way to make moving money quicker and easier. No one likes sending wires. SWIFT absolutely sucks. What are you doing from within your business to either create the scaffolding around stablecoin processing, or to maybe partner up with other businesses that are doing that?
Yeah, so earlier this year, we announced the partnership with Circle, and we'll have similar partnerships that we'll announce around the world, where we have a payments platform. We're agnostic to the rail that it is sent on, or the method that it is sent. And so we just want to enable banks, right, and their customers to get money where they want it to go in the pace that they wanted to get there. Right, stablecoin, these cross-border transfers could be instantaneous at a cost that it meets their goals. And so we're agnostic. We're just an enabler of all of the different solutions that come out. And then ultimately the banks and their customers are going to determine which of these work.
I mean, JP Morgan has Onyx, and Jamie Dimon has to find a way to spend billions of dollars every week. Why would they not just build their own product? Why do they need to use you? Is it just that you're already there, that you're sticky, and that you know the compliance part of it? Or is there actually some edge that makes them go, no, even though I'm a $2 trillion institution, I want to go with these guys. I like them for XYZ reason.
So they're an important customer for multiple products. Interestingly, for their payments platform, they built it themselves. And this actually may work for the small number of the largest banks in the world, right? This is a high-risk endeavor to do on your own. You want depth of expertise. When you're moving around trillions of dollars, you want it to actually work, and it needs to be auditable, and regulators actually care, making sure that it actually works flawlessly. And so, look, the value that we provide is incredible expertise, knowing how to actually operate at scale. Many banks that are more modest in size than JPM, they want to know that they can grow their business, and the tech is going to grow with them. And then we're actually offering tons of innovation, right? So it's not like you're referring to us as a bit legacy. The reality is every one of the banks around the world is experimenting with AI, and what do their AI tools need to actually tap into to drive any value within their organizations? It's the critical systems that we provide. Interestingly, we can provide immense value by providing AI as a complement on top of the existing offerings. I'll give one quick example. So we've been talking a fair bit about payments. So payments, you can find out what are the things that are least efficient in a payments organization. Some of the biggest banks have thousands and thousands of payments operators. We have something we're launching called Operator Assist. The thing that is least efficient in most of these operations is repairing a payment. That's a payment that doesn't go through. Why didn't it go through? You have to find the payment, the field, the issue. We can use AI to actually reduce all of that work, surface up something up for a human, and they can actually enact the action immediately. And so we feel very fortunate. We're in the inner workings of the bank. And ultimately, we'll be bringing ourselves, but also in collaboration with the banks, some really interesting AI solutions to market.
I recall that Citibank, not once but twice, fat-fingered a series of transfers in the billions of dollars, and I hope they weren't using your technology. But if they were, right, what is the pace and speed of transactions, payments, what have you, look like when everything is agentic and things are moving at thousands of transactions a minute? Because it does seem like where Roham is, you're much better situated to actually get things done on the blockchain at the speed that AI seems to demand. What does that look like?
Well, this depends. So, as I said, our platform, we have everything from real-time payments, instant, right, to payment rails that will take and processes that will take days. If you're moving around huge amounts of dollars let's take a simple bank customer requirement, a huge retailer who's buying from foreign suppliers and is sending massive amounts of dollars around the world, do you want everything to be instantaneous where you click a button and it's gone? Right? And so
I'd like no money to leave my account.
Good point. But there's security elements, a whole bunch of checks that are required, and so it really is based on the use case, right? The customer and the bank and what they're looking for. But we can do real time and massive volume right now.
Chris, Roham, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you both so much for joining us today.
Great.
Good stuff. Well played. Nicely done.
Welcome Roger Lynch of Condé Nast and Ben Smith of Semafor.
I love that people applaud in advance.
That's nice.
That actually is only for you.
Let's see if they do it at the end.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see. Anyway, so thank you for joining us. Thank you all for being here. And to begin with, you made some news today. I want to start with the news. You are shutting down a title called Self, which I think hasn't been that much in the conversation lately, and I'm sure, and which is, I assume, the logic for partly why you're shutting it down. But I guess I wanted to ask, on paper, that is a brand which is where so much of the conversation is now: health, wellness, Maha, and Substack is full of this kind of publication, and they're thriving. Why couldn't it work at Conda?
We have brands that cover this space already. Vogue does a lot. Vogue is our largest brand. It covers this, Wired covers it. And for us, it was really more about focus. We're seeing really good success with our largest brands. Our 7 largest brands are 85% of our revenue globally. We have 20-something brands. And I just want our teams really focused on the brands that really have a clear path to continued growth and profitability. So, Vogue has grown. I've been at the company now 7 years, and Vogue has grown every single year, revenue and profitability. Everything new we try with that brand just works. And so we want to just be very focused on the brands that really have a great permission to win and very strong brand presence and authority in their space.
Do you anticipate closing or shutting others this year?
No.
And one more on that. Are you going to sell Glamour?
Are we going to sell Glamour? No. For Glamour, Glamour has a strong business in the UK and the US, and we had some smaller additions in Germany, Spain, and Mexico that were just really too small. And we have Vogue in those markets that cover some of the space that Glamour does also. And so again, we announced that we'll be discontinuing publishing in those Germany, Spain, and Mexico. But Glamour in English language, actually we're just launching announced that we're launching Glamour with our partner News Corp in Australia. So there's still investment going into it.
Lucky Australians. Condé Nast's original slogan, or at least the phrase most associated with it, is class, not mass. And I kind of think in the era of undifferentiated SEO, slurry, it didn't particularly serve Condé well. And everyone's trying to figure out what the new AI era means for different media brands. I noticed, or one of your colleagues mentioned to me, that the president of OpenAI, Greg Brockman, tweeted recently or posted recently that taste is now a core skill in the age of AI. I think taste is basically Condé's core skill, and I wonder, is that an opportunity or is that a threat?
I think it's a huge opportunity. So my view on AI has changed a lot in the last 3 years. When it first came on, it seemed like a big threat, and it was. I mean, AI is changing how people find content, how they search content. I've been very vocal about, we're assuming that search is just not going to be a meaningful part of our business in the future, and planning our business around that. But as we've engaged with these companies and as we use AI in our business increasingly, I see it more as a tailwind now than a headwind. And what you're talking about in particular. So when we first started dealing with some of these AI companies, and we have deals with OpenAI and Perplexity and Amazon and Microsoft and more to come, it was very interesting because the tone of the discussions really felt like to them content was a commodity. It was literally, I had one executive at one of the big AI companies say, how many words do you have that you can license to us?
So just tonnage.
It was tonnage. Said, what do you mean words? Like, do the words matter, or is it just the number of words? Nope. And today it's completely flipped. Because they've seen how our content does in their answer engines, and because increasingly, the point you just made, which is AI is really good at certain things. Things that involve taste, it's terrible at. And that's the core of what we do and our titles. So I think that presents a huge
So that means that in theory, you can charge these guys a premium so that Claude can sound more sophisticated and have better judgment in menswear than chat?
Well, look, I think the licensing side is fine. But what interests me much more is what are the products that you can produce with our content and with these AI companies. I think they're really interesting product opportunities that it creates.
I mean, I think I took Brock. I mean, I think that's obviously true, but I think I take the way they're talking about, and there's an interesting Times story by Joe Bernstein about this, about the way they're talking about taste a little differently, which is almost like in a world in which writing is automated and so much cognition is automated, like taste is the remaining human skill, which is another, I mean, obviously it's, I think, basically good for Condé. But I wonder, do you think the natural home for tastemakers more broadly, is it still editorial? It feels like in the way that culture is changing, taste and style are less and less driven by editorial, more by influencers, more by technology.
Well, I think, influence is a different form of editorial. And so I think it's something we're embracing. We have a new initiative that we announced at the end of last year called VET, which is really at the intersection of e-commerce, social commerce, and the creator economy. Specifically in our big lane, which is luxury, fashion, and beauty. And it's enabling creators to create storefronts in a marketplace model that sort of connects all of those. And so I think the creator economy is really interesting. Why do brands work with them? Because these people can influence outcomes. It's the same reason they work with us. It's the same reason we have such a big advertising business, is because we're the ultimate influencer. Vogue is the ultimate fashion influencer, and it's still a really, really good business for us. But I think the creator economy creates new opportunities for us too.
Your tenure at Condé has been about reorienting the company's business toward digital and toward subscription across different axes. What's the sort of end state for Condé in terms of the breakdown between, assuming it's mostly digital in some future state, what's the right balance of advertising and subscription, or what's the sort of optimal balance in your kind of like when you have the deck that goes out to 2032?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the areas that advertising for us is at best it's a slow growth business. There's areas of advertising that are growing very fast for us. Branded content It's actually our biggest area of advertising, and it's growing very nicely. Display is, it's dependent on search traffic and things like that. Print advertising is a declining business, slowly declining, but a declining business. But the areas of growth for us, digital subscriptions, I think grew 29% last year. E-commerce, a very fast-growing area. There's a lot of opportunity for us in that. Events, really, our events business is a significant-sized business, and it grew 40-something% last year, and it's probably going to grow 50% on top of that this year.
No, I know. We were talking before. I mean, I find producing this event, which we are very proud of, fairly high complexity. But you were telling me you had like 650 performers at
Vogue World.
Vogue World. So we're not. I mean, that's next year for us.
I'll be back for that.
You'll be one of them. Well, you're one of the performers. You run, I think, one of the few really global media businesses, and as we leave this sort of very homogenized social media world into a kind of more differentiated one, I'm curious what you're seeing in different markets. Just to begin with, I think you're really, really one of the very few Western media companies that's been successful in China. What do you, and that continues to try to operate there?
Yeah.
What do you see there? What is Condé there? What's working? What does it tell you?
Well, first of all, it's a very, very complex place to operate.
I think it's one of your three big markets are the U.S., U.K., and China.
And China.
I mean, I'm not sure there are other media companies that can say that.
No, and like I said, it's a very complex place. There are some companies that operate through licensees there, but we operate our businesses directly there, and also in the Middle East now, which we're the first.
Can you just describe the China business? Like, what is Condé in China?
Vogue, GQ, AD, Condé Nast Traveler.
On what platforms?
Well, we obviously have print publications, but China's very different than the rest of the world in how people consume content. They don't really go to websites. It's all app-based. But it changes. A few years ago, you have platforms, Weibo and others that were really popular, and then Little Red Book becomes much more popular, and sort of and so it's a movable feast there, which is fascinating to watch. But it requires teams that are very agile and trying new things and embracing new platforms, and it's a very digital business for us.
Avoiding criticism of leaders' outfits if necessary.
Yeah, we've made that mistake once.
Yeah.
Once.
Do you think other media companies are making a mistake? Because I think there's just a consensus that you really can't do media. I think everyone except you has pulled out. Do you think others are making a mistake, or that you have an edge and the brand's
Well,
an edge?
first of all, we don't do news.
Right.
So we don't operate the New Yorker in China, or Wired, or even Vanity Fair. And for a reason, because we don't believe we would be allowed to do news in a way that would be true to our... But, our lifestyle brands, they're totally fine to operate there.
Yeah.
So I think, look, it's not for the faint-hearted, because it is a complex place to operate. But if you get it right, it's a huge economy, huge growing middle class, and it is a very profitable business for us.
Speaking of complicated places to operate, last year you took back the license of your licensee in the Gulf, in Dubai, and the Emirates and Saudi. I mean, in retrospect, given the war, was that a mistake?
No. I honestly think it was one of the best decisions I've made at the company. That region has so much growth potential. And we, like most media companies, operate through licensees there. And when those licenses expired, we started taking them back so we could launch our own business. We launched, last year was its first full year of operation, and it was already profitable, and it's growing. It's growing again this year. Certainly the war will impact somewhat, but when I talk to our teams there, it's amazing to speak to the people who are living there. Of course, it's jarring to live in Dubai and have missile interceptors firing off. But they're so focused on the future and the opportunity there that sometimes it feels like we're more worried about it here than they are living through it there.
And have you canceled events, postponed events? Are you doubling down?
The thing I did cancel was I was scheduled at the end of February to take my board to Dubai for a board meeting. We wisely canceled that, so maybe we'll do it next February.
And why is that such a what is the business again? Just because you're such a diverse business, what is the business in the Gulf? What's the most profitable, booming thing you've got there?
Well, I mean, Vogue is our biggest brand everywhere, but we operate Vogue, GQ, Condé Nast Traveler, AD, and we just launched Wired in the Middle East. So, but look, it is a region that is very digital, very young, a lot of growth, and a huge luxury market. Again, our biggest category is luxury, fashion, travel. That is the Middle East.
And finally, Europe. It's almost sort of surprising that the continental Europe for magazines like yours isn't as big a market. Why do you think that is?
Well,
that the UK is.
UK is, it's usually UK and China that are tied for our second biggest markets. But we operate across all of Europe, and so Europe is a very large business for us. But Europe in general, the economies are not that vibrant right now. UK is under pressure, Germany's under pressure. So we're not seeing the growth that we're seeing in other, like the US is very strong for us right now. Continues, especially luxury and fashion. And when I speak to the luxury and fashion CEOs, they all talk about the growth that they see coming out of the US right now.
And then continuing the tour of your properties, Wired has been booming in its subscriptions, driving, I think, some people in the technology industry insane because they see it now as because it was the Bible of their industry in the 90s, and now they see it as hostile, covered the hell out of the Doge situation. Are you comfortable with that level of confrontation with the Trump administration?
I think it's...
And a lot of people in this building are not.
Yeah, well, look, we have a big competitive advantage. We don't have an FCC license. We're not trying to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. We don't need any approvals from the government.
Yep.
And we have owners who do not interfere. I've been, I mentioned 7 years at the company. The Newhouse family that's owned Condé Nast for 70 years, the number of times I've received a call from them on anything zero. They do not interfere, which gives me as a CEO the ability to just appoint the best editors, let them do their job, and encourage them. And what I've told our editors, especially the ones who are journalists who are based here in DC, is there's fewer and fewer places that can actually do the level of journalism that our journalists can do because of the political pressure. And that means there's more responsibility on them to do it and to do their best work.
And what do you say to the sort of Mark Andreessens of the world who miss the Wired of their youth?
Look, well, first of all, before I came to Condé Nast, I spent my entire career in technology.
This is your world, of course, yes.
So a lot of these people are my friends, and they call me. And what I have to remind them is, look, I was in Silicon Valley since the mid-'90s. The relationship that society had with technology back then, they're still lost in that sort of nostalgia.
Do you think your old friends there have lost their minds?
I don't think they've lost their mind. I think they're still thinking about technology as the new shiny thing that's going to save the world. And the rest of society is saying, wait a minute. Like, look at all the harm that's happening, with social media or the risks of AI and all these. So the relationship between society and technology has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And therefore, the journalism that covers it should change also.
Last question, our last few seconds. You mentioned appointing editors is a big part of your role. I know David Remnick at The New Yorker has re-upped for a year, but like the favorite, New York journalist's favorite game is trying to figure out who's going to be the next editor of The New Yorker. Anything about how you're going to approach that decision?
Well, I'm hoping you're going to sign up.
Flattery will get you everywhere. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Welcome John Jovanovic of Export-Import Bank of the United States and Eleanor Mueller of Semafor.
Tell me when to go as a starter. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here with us today. Thank you so much for making this work.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure.
So I want to start at the top. You've said repeatedly that you see a lot of parallels between today and 1934 when FDR first founded the Ex-Im Bank. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So I assume a lot of your audience has never heard of the Export-Import Bank of the United States, but 92 years ago, Franklin Roosevelt created the bank to address a couple of key challenges that were at hand. Number one, he saw a need to reindustrialize America after the Great Depression. And by the way, I was fortunate enough to serve President Trump in his first administration. And what drew me back into government service a second time was President Trump's passionate commitment to reindustrializing America and to doing so to ensure that we have well-paying jobs all over the country again. And so President Roosevelt saw that the best way to create more jobs in America that were well-paying was to create more demand for goods and services and technologies that were manufactured in America. And so knew that we needed to open up markets for our companies and make sure there was a level playing field. And so when I had the opportunity to sit with the president and throw my hat in the ring for something, he said, "What would you like to do?" I said, "Mr. President, I'd love to be chairman of the Export-Import Bank."
Maybe the only taker.
He looked at me the way my late father used to look at me sometimes when maybe I was about to make a big mistake, sort of like, "Are you sure?" He asked me a really good question. Why? And I said, "Mr. President, I think you deserve a bank that could be a frontline economic tool, that could be revitalized in service of your economic agenda." And so we've outlined 4 strategic priorities around which to really revitalize XM. And the first was we wanted to bring it back to basics. And this is the big bet that I was making on XM. I've made contrarian bets before in my career, and so this perhaps was a contrarian bet. What I saw was an opportunity to reawaken muscle memory, because for the vast majority of those 92 years, XM did big transformative things all around the world, coming back to 1934, helped build up industrial capacity in the United States, which a few short years later was used to help the Allies win World War II, and then help deliver the peace, help deliver the Marshall Plan, help ensure that we can build some of the most transformative infrastructure all around the world with American technology, American companies, American workers benefiting, that shaped the 20th century. And so as we look at the challenges that we face today, those outline our next 3 priorities, right? Energy leadership, energy dominance, energy security, right? I thought, and our team believes, and we're seeing it happen, XM could be a frontline economic tool to deliver American energy molecules and technologies to every corner of the globe, right? Number 3, supply chain security. And tracking some of the discussions here this week with Semafor, it's been on everyone's mind. And so we've become over-reliant on supply chains that aren't free, they aren't fair, and they aren't functioning. And we need to do everything we can to de-risk them and to ensure that in times of disruption, American companies and American workers and our allies can rely on supply chains that work. And so we could talk about Project Vault later on, which is an innovative thing that we've announced with the president. But we have a mandate to help bring about domestic supply chain security. Number 4, last but not least, how do we help ensure that American companies working with our allies can win in the industries of the future? So we're very grateful to be a part of the President's Global AI Export Plan, led by my good friend and classmate Michael Kratsios at the White House, but in partnership with the Department of Commerce, the State Department, Treasury. So it's a DFC, OSC. It is a whole-of-government approach to say, how do we help ensure that US-led, allied-led AI shapes the future? And it's not just AI, it's dual-use technologies, it's advanced mobility, it's all the things we're saying. And so that's what we're doing at XM, and that's why I think XM's mission is more important today than it's ever been in 92 years.
So the bank's under a lot of scrutiny right now because lawmakers are deciding whether or not to reauthorize its funding, potentially for another 10 years. The last time this happened, it took Congress 4 years to reach an agreement, during which time a lot of the bank was dormant. Do you think this time will be different? It's already very different. And so I've just gone through hours and hours of testimony before the House and the Senate. All of it, it was a very rare glimpse of bipartisanship around the bank's mission. Because fundamentally speaking, what we do is help support US jobs across the country. And here's what's most interesting that I think your audience probably doesn't appreciate, because it's always fun to talk about the big transformative billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar initiatives, right? But on nearly 90% of what the Export-Import Bank in the United States does every single day in terms of transaction volume
is to support small and medium-sized companies in the United States. Makes sense because 95% of businesses in America are small and medium-sized businesses, right? And so when we think about, and I think we were talking a little bit backstage about what it means to have supply chain resilience. What is a supply chain? It's a bunch of companies working together to deliver on a joint mission, a joint objective. Well, what we've seen in operating across all 50 states, and I'm telling you, in everybody's district, in every senator's state, we support a business that otherwise would be in trouble without our partnership. And so the best day in a business owner's life may be the worst day in their career because they get an order to deliver something that could be transformative. They know they're going to add revenue, but they really struggle with how to finance it. And that's where our partnerships with community lenders and regional banks really matter. But we're seeing a tremendous amount of momentum, and we anticipate that we'll be reauthorized and continue to deliver for the American people.
That's a good transition to another thing I wanted to ask you about, which is this work that you've mentioned, what the bank does to help small and medium-sized businesses. What is Exim doing specifically to ensure that Project Vault, which you mentioned, the public-private partnership that the Trump administration announced earlier this year to create a critical mineral stockpile, is open to those small and medium-sized businesses?
So first and foremost, it was designed to be open to small and medium-sized businesses. And it was a really unique challenge from the president. Just, over the course of past 100-odd years or so, we here in the United States have done stockpiling in one way, shape, or form, but always for defense purposes. And so we've never in US history had a stockpile dedicated to non-defense manufacturers. And we knew that we had to come up with something that was scalable, right? Something that could be successful and future-proofed, and that put America's best foot forward. And so actually the first thing anyone would do when having to stand up an important initiative like this is have the humility to go around the world and say, okay, what models are working? Hopefully we'll find one that works and emulate it. The challenge was none of them put America's best foot forward. And so what we ended up designing was really a demand-driven model where we started by defining the problem and saying, okay, manufacturers in America and around the world writ large, especially in allied nations, have gone to a just-in-time inventory model, right? Why have they done so? It's not because they're bad people, it's because it makes financial sense. And they're punished for not doing so. And so what may be balance sheet efficient or financially opportune has exposed a lot of operational vulnerabilities, right? And so it makes sense for the just-in-time, but how do we get these companies to think about the just-in-case? You could force them, you could cajole them, or you can create a structure like Project Vault where they say, well, you're helping us solve a problem we have. It's not a free ride, right? We as manufacturers have to commit to it, but this is an idea, this isn't an example of where industrial policy could work, right? Because it's focused on market factors, it's driven by the demand, and it has a financial structure where the American taxpayer isn't subsidizing it, right? And more importantly, I would say, we were really focused on making sure that any effort didn't invite more problems than it was solving. And so what we see in Project Vault is an opportunity to help catalyze a broader ecosystem to help address the supply chain security issues, whether it's helping more mines come online in the United States and amongst our allies, helping new refining and processing capacity come into play, helping build out more industrial bonded storage for critical raw materials in the United States, and all the while helping improve with price discovery and transparency, all the things that healthy markets want and need. We're hoping we could play a role in that.
Do we know yet when the stockpile could be complete? What's the timeline?
So the beauty of it is that it's not a conventional stockpile, because a conventional stockpile is where capital goes to die, right? And it's also quite centralized, right? So I decide I know what you need. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. And I'll buy a bunch of it and I'll leave it somewhere, right? Where we've created a dynamic mechanism where manufacturers interact with it. They can withdraw certain amounts from it every single year, so long as they replenish it, right? In the event of an emergency, of course, they can have access to all of it. They could use Project Vault as a mechanism to toll new facilities, to offtake from new mines, to take on more transformative activities that otherwise taken on their balance sheet alone would fall short. But let me come back to your question from a moment ago. Is how can small companies play a role? Do they have access to it? And the interesting thing about it is, as you look at these complex supply chains, particularly for even the largest manufacturers, they oftentimes don't know where the choke point components or the choke point raw material is coming from, because it's a downstream supplier who's providing it. And so by including the largest companies in America, we're opening up opportunity for the small, medium-sized companies in America to participate and to be able to, maybe for the first time ever, plan ahead for what they need when they need it most.
So circling back to the reauthorization process, another thing that we've heard and that you heard in these hearings was concerns from Democrats about the Office of the Inspector General being not empty, but there's not currently an Inspector General.
Well, that's not true. There's an acting Inspector General.
Do you expect him to be confirmed to that role soon?
Well, look, I control what I can control. What I can tell you is that I've taken on a very proactive and aggressive approach to ensuring that we have a fantastic relationship with our Inspector General. So my first day at the bank, I inherited nearly 100 open items from the Inspector General. And I had a meeting immediately saying my goal was to bring that to zero as fast as practical. And so as of 2 weeks ago, I believe, we had already addressed 50% of them and closed them out. We're expeditiously moving. I said in my confirmation hearing, and I'll say it here today, I'm in favor of an independent Inspector General. I want to work with the Inspector General. We work very closely with them. They play a really key role in ensuring they can root out waste, fraud, and abuse, and they'll have nothing but an active, willing, open partner in me.
There you have it. You are also, other vacancies, there's not any Democratic members of the Exim Bank right now. Do you expect that to change anytime soon?
What I said in my hearing, and I'll repeat, is any chairman of a board, any president or CEO of a company knows it's important to have a full slate of directors, and I'm very much in support of that.
There you have it. So the African Exim Bank just announced $10 billion to soften the economic fallout from the war in Iran. Do you think there's a similar lane there for the U.S. Exim Bank when it comes to the war?
So we have a very important relationship with Africa. In fact, written into our charter is a mandate to help support sub-Saharan African trade routes and business ties, and we take that very seriously. So we've actually just set up what I believe to be a fantastic Africa Advisory Committee. We are actively focused on opportunities, whether it's in supply chain security, energy security, other ways to have U.S. technologies and companies large and small play a very constructive role on the continent. And we take that very, very sort of diligently, and so you could look forward to hearing more about Africa from us.
Awesome. So another country that we've seen a lot of focus on from the administration, Venezuela. The Treasury Secretary, the Energy Secretary floated in January that the Exim Bank could have a role maybe in financing for Venezuela's oil sector as we try and get the country back on its feet. Is that something that's still on the table?
So I think Secretary Rubio said it best in his, I believe in his congressional testimony, where he said the near-term objective is to ensure that the situation in Venezuela is stabilized, both security and economic-wise. And so I think what they were referencing was us trying to help the overall government think through accountability and transparency around fund flows, right? And so we're currently closed for business in Venezuela. We're working on being open for business in Venezuela again, which is a process that we respect, that we're going through. But I think it's worth zooming out on the Western Hemisphere, which this is a transformative opportunity for Venezuela and beyond. And what the president's done is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for these countries to solidify their economic relationship with the United States, to make some of the hard decisions that these countries have made, and to do so in partnership with the U.S. I just returned from Argentina and Guyana last week, where what's happening there is remarkable. And ensuring that there's peace, prosperity, and stability in the Western Hemisphere has been the president's objective since 2015, since he announced he was running the first time, and firmly believe he will deliver on it before he leaves office.
Well, that's a good note to leave it on. Thank you so much for taking
Thank you.
time. Thank you all for being here.
welcome Steve Bannon of Steve Bannon's War Room and Ben Smith of Semafor.
Look at that. Your fans are here, or one of them. Thank you, sir.
I want to thank my agent.
So I was just thinking, we were here a year ago, talking about the administration, talking about MAGA, and I think then it felt like your wing of the Republican Party was ascendant. A year later, Trump's at war in the Middle East. He's doing a deal with China. You're fighting him over deportations. So what happened?
I don't know, fighting him. Look, first of all, we were ascendant on those policies, and we'll be ascendant again. President Trump just announced, I think, a peace deal in the Middle East, peace deal with Lebanon. We'll see how it works out. I think the blockade's very strong. But people shouldn't lose the fact that the populist nationalist movement in this country has got a lot of muscle, right? Right now, we've had a huge victory in Texas. We're fighting to a draw in Virginia. If you look in South Carolina, Lindsey Graham's below 50%. So we got a lot of stroke, and I think people are getting very motivated. Some of the policies are maybe not totally aligned, but President Trump's our leader, and I realize there's been a lot of noise out there about President Trump and the war and maybe some of our alliances, but I think this movement at its core, particularly on the core issues, is stronger than ever.
But can you give me your sense and of basically how the administration has gone so far? Kind of periodize it for me a little. Like there was a period where it just felt like this was Steve Bannon flood the zone being quoted constantly, and really the policies were coming from the populist wing, and it felt, I don't know, I guess I put it at the first Iran bombing when it felt like that stopped and we went in a different direction. But how do you see it?
Well, because remember, the 4 years we had in the wilderness, we had a political operation, which was the precinct strategy to really become very proficient in getting out low information, low propensity voters, which led to the 22 and the 24 victory. In addition, we had public intellectuals that stepped up and did, like Russ Vought, who's Secretary of OMB right now, that did Center for Renewing America, Project 2025. So those first 6 months, when I was here last year, we were the beneficiary of 4 years of being in the wilderness, but with policies, cadres, we had networks of people that came in the administration, they were filling up. Sergio Gore was personnel. So we had the non-Senate confirmed. So when we were here last year and all the way through the June bombing, we were on a roll. But as Washington does, right, the lobbyists and the corporations and the donors, and I think, I'm not saying we're off track. I think some of these are not as hard and tough as we want to be. And I keep telling people, President Trump in this movement he created is a moderate. After President Trump, and really a lot of the muscle in our movement is much farther right than President Trump and much harder, much more nationalistic than even President Trump is. So I think you're going to see a resurgence of that. I'm actually very optimistic about November. I think November we're going to hold the House. I think if we can get the Senate to do anything, we can actually hold the Senate, and they look grim right now. But I see grassroots people out there that are thirsting to get back into the fight and thirsting to fight for these policies. I think a few changes of these policies, and we're going to get people back out there, and I feel better than ever in our movement.
And this is
and I know it works because the first up until the bombing in Iran, and even remember that bombing was not as bad as it could have been because the greatest ally in the world wanted regime change, and President Trump did total obliteration of the nuclear program, which still rolls through the day. It's one of the reasons that they're talking about this deal that he might go to Islamabad and do because of the beginnings of that bombing. So
was that sarcasm? Do you not think they're the greatest ally in the world?
No, I do not think they're the greatest ally in the world. In fact, I think the only worst allies you could have are the Arab allies we've got in the Gulf. I think Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, I don't think any of them are any good, right? They're double dealing us all the time. Right now, I think the strategy is perfect with the blockade. As soon as we get this sorted out with the Chinese Communist Party, I keep saying the Middle East is a sideshow and Israel's a sideshow to a sideshow. We've got to pull back. We have to pull back the hemispheric defense, the Central Pacific as the strategic pivot, like Mackinder said, the Eurasian landmass. The heartland is the pivot for Eurasia. The pivot for the United States is that vast Pacific, as the giants in the 19th century knew. So I think we pull back here, and this is how we control the world, is through hemispheric defense and controlling the Pacific. We're a Pacific nation. But no, I think we got to get out of the Middle East. I think our Arab allies are terrible. And I think Israel shows you that they go their own way every time.
I want to go back to something you said earlier about the kind of business and the lobbyists. There may be a couple lobbyists in this room. You can raise your hands or not. But certainly a business-heavy crowd. And that has been, I spent a lot of time with you over the last year, and kind of my observation has just been that it just feels like in Washington, the money always wins when there's a conflict right now. And I think that's sort of what you observe too. Why is that? Why do you think that the kind of movement right is getting rolled by the kind of corporate right?
It doesn't always get rolled. What I said last time also, I said, hey, you're going to have two choices. You're going to have Mangione, or you're going to have what turned out to be Mandami, right? You're going to have, and Mandami's populism on the left actually thinks it's more of neo-Marxism and jihadism. But but it's very effective. What they've done is copied us on how to get out the vote. The Working Family Party and DSA down in Texas, where they won some big state elections. These people are just like us. They get out and get low propensity voters. You should not discount them. They're very, very tough. But when we say the money wins, what I tell the money, you're only digging yourselves into a deeper hole. Because right now we're heading to, I think, crisis after crisis. And you can see this in this country with the information state, particularly what's happening with AI. If you look at young people, young men of Hispanic, black, white right now, they're getting more and more, some to the left, but a lot to the right. These people are much more nationalistic, and we're going to get to what I say, if you don't address this now with policies that can work for working class people, you're going to go for, because our movement right now is more populist than nationalist. It's going to get to be more nationalist. And after that, you're going to become ultra-nationalist. And when I say ultra-nationalist, that means foreign capital out, foreigners out. It's going to be tough, so we've got to solve these problems today.
And I think when you said this a year ago, you've got a choice between Steve Bannon and Luigi Mangione, I think people were kind of pretty freaked out. There is a lot.
They didn't know which one to choose, right?
I think people in Washington right now are much less worried that that's going to be the choice, and I wonder. And you say you think Republicans are gonna take the House. That's that's a very, if you bet on that on Cal-Share politics, you're gonna make a lot of money.
When you say that, look at John Cornyn. John Cornyn spent $80 million to $100 million, the same old playbook to destroy Ken Paxton. We went down to Texas with Gert Wilders and Glenn Beck in January. We had a proposition on the ballot. We put a proposition on it to galvanize people. That was to prohibit Sharia law in the state of Texas. Also to have, that's funny? Is that funny? Okay, fine. You're going to see how funny it is. We're prohibiting Sharia law in Texas, and we're going to shut down a lot of this nonsense that's going on. The next thing we're going to shut down is the H-1B visas. People in the United States, citizens of this country, are not prepared to have this. You may think it's funny. Folks in Texas don't think it's funny. Folks in South Carolina don't think it's funny. And this is that seething anger right below the surface. Because the global elites, you sit there and mock these people like they don't count, like African Americans don't count, working class Hispanics don't count, working class whites don't count. That is the backbone of this country. And trust me, that is a latent political power that is being turned into a political power. So no, we're going to ban Sharia law in this country. We've already designated in Texas the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE as terrorist organizations, as has many in the Gulf Emirates. So no, this is very serious. We got 2 million votes on that proposition and galvanized the Paxton team to actually now lead, I think, Cornyn by 8% with no money. Cornyn spent $80 to $100 million. Lindsey Graham, right now, the globalist, is under 50% in South Carolina. So the populist movement, when you look at really victories we can have, is more powerful than ever, and it's only going to get more powerful over time. So laugh all you want, but he who laughs last laughs best. And the people in this country are not going to tolerate what you stand for. You stand for the destruction of this country, the sovereignty of this nation. And you look for the destruction of American citizens. The system that is going to come in place is not simply America first. It's American citizens first. American citizens have to have a better deal than any foreigners here. They have to have a better deal than any illegal alien. And that day is coming.
I think a lot of your fights have been inside the right, the ones that you're talking about the Texas primary. But you also have some sort of, I think, are building some unusual coalitions. And I'm specifically thinking about AI. What are you kind of hearing and feeling from the base about artificial intelligence and about the big AI companies?
The American people have turned off about it. Look what happened in New Mexico. Well, first off, you talk about populism. Look at what's happened in the trial yesterday with Live Nation. First time in 45 years at a jury trial, the little guy stood up and said, "You're an illegal monopoly, you have to be broken up." Look what happened in New Mexico with Meta. What was a 4 or 5 week trial that took an hour to determine, and in Los Angeles, where the little guy gets a voice and a vote. He votes against everything you guys stand for, and particularly these out-of-control AI companies. Right now, we stopped the amnesty bill, preemption, in the Big Beautiful Bill. We stopped it again in the NDAA, the must pass. The White House came out with their framework. I think that's already shattered. David Sachs essentially relieved for cause for not delivering. And this is a coalition of the left and the right. And quite frankly, the right is now just starting to stand, not the leaders of the right, but people in these states. Ron DeSantis, very smart person, yesterday said, "I'm calling a special session to bring people back to essentially decelerate artificial intelligence." They can't use the excuse we've had a Sputnik moment and it's the Chinese Communist Party. That's the fear. We cut the chips off. I don't care what NVIDIA wants to do.
Just to go back, why are people upset about AI?
Because first off, the damage it's doing to kids, what it's doing to the country, what it's doing to jobs, but most importantly, it's like mythos. When we had nuclear power, right? You remember from the Oppenheimer movie, you had the Atomic Energy Commission. You had some sort of at least modicum of a regulatory apparatus. These oligarchs want absolutely no control. They are radical accelerationists. And we know now from mythos that they're the first guys to say, "Hey, look, this thing is out of control. We can't even put it out." So we have to have controls of artificial intelligence. We cannot just be accelerationists. And that means some modicum of regulatory control. Right now in this city, they are plotting with Speaker Johnson to, I think, since they've lost 3 times, to take a preemption bill that preempts all state regulations and to put it in a must-pass legislation. I think we're going to try to do it in reconciliation and try to do the Save America Act. So to say to the right, "Oh, you guys want to make sure that there's no more way to cheat, you're going to have to take AI." That's not going to work. AI, behind the scenes with the populist right, is, I think, actually right next to immigration, our top issue. And people are galvanized by this. And you can see DeSantis, as smart as he is, really calling back for a special session to deal with it.
Do you think in Anthropic's conflict with the Department of War, do you think Anthropic had it right?
I think Anthropic had it right. I think Anthropic, it's very, very complicated. I really respect Pete Hegseth. We were the leaders of getting Pete confirmed, our show. I have tremendous respect for them over there. But I think in this situation, right, it's almost too dangerous. And I think we have to then have it coming together about it. That's why you need a sort of atomic energy commission. You need some sort of modicum of regulatory, not just about the kids, the chat GPTs and the suicides. That's bad enough. It's terrible. Not just about our copyright holders paid for. But the central thing is what is happening in the weapons lab with AI. We have no earthly idea. Mythos Review just gets dropped on you. You have no earthly idea what's going on. We can't do that. And we cannot particularly turn it over to Elon Musk and Meta. And you saw what a jury, when a jury had a shot at Zuckerberg, you saw what they did. That's only going to get worse. We have to come together and figure this out. And you can't jam people by putting it into a must-pass.
We're almost out of time, but a final question. Is J.D. Vance heir to the MAGA movement? Is he the heir apparent?
I don't think MAGA has President Trump. And as you know, I'm a huge advocate of President Trump's 3rd term. So right now, I think...
You're not just saying that to mess with J.D.?
No, not at all. I think you guys all paid your taxes here yesterday. Are there anyone in the room who would not vote for President Trump and what he's trying to do with this economy? President Trump is...
I can't imagine, but we're out of time, so we'll have to pick that up. Thank you, Steve.
please welcome Ivan Tornos of Zimmer Bioment and Prashant Rao of Semafor.
Ivan, thanks for making the time. Appreciate it.
Great to be here.
So let's start. Basically everyone in the world is worried about worsening demographics. Everybody's getting old, bad for the economy, bad for taxes. You are among the few companies which is like, sweet, older people. Let's do it.
We're in the business. Good afternoon. I'm Ivan Tornos. I'm the chairman CEO of the world's largest orthopedic company. So we like people when they age. We also like people when they're mobile. We're in the business of keeping people moving. So demographics is obviously a tailwind for us. The longer that you live, the higher the probability that at some point you have to go through a joint replacement, whether it's a knee, whether it's a hip, or whatever. But we don't wait for people to get old, to engage them. Over the last 3 years, we've been an explosion of mobility here in the US with GLP-1s, people getting active, pickleball, things like that. So again, demographics are a tailwind, but so is general mobility at all ages.
Yeah, like pickleball, it's like, sweet, you're getting hurt. That's what we want.
I don't know if I want to say like that, but please keep playing pickleball.
Okay, sure. So I think, you sort of are, one of the big topics is in the healthcare space is AI and robotics. I mean, in all spaces, frankly, but I'm curious, what kind of advances can we reasonably expect when it comes to AI and robotics in the next, let's say, 5 years?
Sure. Maybe we'll start with the problem we're trying to solve, because it's very cute to talk about gadgets, and we got a ton of gadgets. We partner with Microsoft, we partner with Apple. We will be launching in 2027 the first fully autonomous surgical robot in orthopedics. Essentially a robot that can do most of the case, if not all the case. But let's talk about problems. 3 problems come to mind. Efficiency. I don't need to convince anybody here that healthcare is not delivered in an efficient way. Here in the US, we spend $5 trillion in healthcare. We waste 20 to 25% of that money. Surgical time is too long. Time in a hospital is too long. Readmissions are too high. Efficiency. Infections continue to be an issue. 2 to 3% in our area, 5, 10% in other areas around the world. And then lastly, outcomes are not great. So those are the 3 problems we're trying to solve, and AI can actually solve all 3 of them. AI can predict when is the right time for you to engage in a procedure. We have data lakes, digital twins that can tell you exactly what is the surgical algorithm, what is the actual kind of implant you need to take, what will your recovery look like, so that yields better outcomes. Again, efficient technology, robotics, and AI can actually shorten the entire episode of care and the time in surgery. So we look at those 3 problems. We're launching fully autonomous robotics. We got fast surgical AI-based devices. I could talk an hour about AI. I think it's going to solve everything.
That's great. Yeah, I guess one of the kind of interesting questions, though, and this comes up with autonomous cars too, right, is when something goes wrong, what is the kind of liability? Because I'm sure in the short term there's like limited uses, but over time, in theory, as robotics advances in autonomous cars, what happens in an accident? Is it the car maker? Is it the passenger? Is it the software developer? Whatever. Like, how are you thinking about that right now?
Do we have lawyers in the room? I prefer to use the word accountability versus liability. So we're accountable to everything that we design and manufacture. We've been in business for 100 years, so we design and manufacture products like they're intended for family members. So we're accountable. In terms of who's liable, look, I think that's a discussion that we need to think about. Generally, even with a fully autonomous robot, it is the surgeon that decides the technique. That's the planning. It is the staff in the hospital that decides to use different devices. And certainly something with the actual device is not performing according to expectations, there is an element of liability. So I would say it's probably cost share, if you will. But again, I think that's a conversation we need to be having case by case.
And do you think is that kind of thinking, that kind of conversation quite in an early stage right now because robotics isn't really in the sort of healthcare space that aggressively?
It's a very interesting debate, and it's all over social media. I think a lot of surgeons are spooked, for lack of a better word. They think of companies like ours as a company that is selling a driverless car to a taxi driver. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is bringing you a GPS or maybe a co-pilot type of tool. What we're doing is actually helping you deal with more patients in a more accurate way. So going back to your first question around efficiency and demographics, I think we're going to make surgeons faster, better, definitely smarter.
This is all really great. I'm curious, I want to talk about some of the challenges that you and frankly every business here is going through. We currently have a ceasefire on the Strait of Hormuz, but not that directly affects, but I'm curious, like, how is this kind of geopolitical volatility, whether it's the Strait of Hormuz in this past several years, how has that affected the sort of supply chain, just the ability to build the products that you sort of deploy?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think that COVID was just a great experience. I hate to say it, but it prepared us for all of the stuff that we're seeing today. So throughout COVID, we learned that we had to be more nimble. We used to operate in 125 countries. Now we are great in 60, 70. We used to have multiple partner suppliers. Now we got a fraction of those. Throughout COVID, we learned the importance of really thinking the strategy for the long term, even the short-term hiccups. So in many ways, we learned a lot through COVID. Geopolitics, yeah, we do have a business in the Middle East. It's 2% of our sales. Obviously, we have a large footprint in China. We pay attention to everything that is happening in that regard. But as I tell people, we've been around in business since 1927. I believe Calvin Coolidge was the president then. We've gone through 18 administrations. We've gone through world wars. We've gone through Great Depressions, Great Recessions. And when you have a strategy that is reliable, durable, and solves something meaningful for a patient, I think you can navigate things like tariffs, which we do. And we can operate with a level of agility that a lot of companies cannot.
Let's talk about tariffs. I suspect you, like many of the other kind of CEOs we've interviewed on stage, spend a lot more time in Washington these days, just because it is the sort of center of the world in this kind of economic sense. I mean, first off, what has the impact on tariffs been in the past sort of 12 months on your business since Liberation Day, and what is your general forecast for the next 12?
Sure. Number two, I will have to make it up. So let me start with number one. We lack in the sense that we are a Warsaw, Indiana-based company. We've been based in Indiana since 1927. 80% of our manufacturing is in Indiana. 9% is in China, and the rest is all over the place. So the impact for us has been lesser than some of my peers. That's not to say that it's not a headwind, but we've been able to navigate it. We're not passing that cost to the customer ultimately. And again, going back to simplification, we simplify things like the portfolio. Certain products make more sense than others in a world of tariffs. The forecast, the next 12, 15 months, or even years, who knows? We know that given the Supreme Court announcement, we're going to be getting some money back, that we're going to reinvest in the business. And we're paying attention. We're paying attention to what's happening with tariffs, but luckily for us, it's not one of the major headwinds.
And leave aside the financial impact and the kind of balance sheet side, I'm curious how it affects your sort of strategy in terms of where you invest. I mean, you've already talked about how you changed your supply chain. I mean, casting it forward, given this sort of volatility in the administration's own kind of trade policy, how do you sort of approach that in terms of that?
So not trying to get cute or didactic here, but a strategy by definition is long term. So we do deal with the short term adversities and headwinds like tariffs and whatnot, but we manage the business for the long term. So we think 2035, 2040 in some of our strategic planning discussions. So tariffs, God only knows what they look like 3, 5, 7 years from now. So we got a very resilient model. We have ways to mitigate those headwinds in the short term, but our focus is long term. What are we doing in AI? What are we doing in manufacturing, net of tariffs? How are we dealing with human capabilities? How are we rethinking talent in a world of AI? So that's how we run the company. So again, short-term pain, we deal with it, but we are focusing on making this company future-proof.
And then you described this sort of 9% in China. Was it 70% in Indiana?
80% more or less in Indiana.
I mean, how do you think that balance changes in 7 years? So you were saying 3, 5, 7 years. Like, how do you think that is like different?
I do believe that the U.S. will continue to be the lion's share of our manufacturing, especially as labor arbitrage is not as important or not as relevant as it used to be. AI, if everything that I'm telling you around the power of AI is accurate, I do think at some point there is more coming into the U.S. I don't think our footprint in China is going to change dramatically, to be very honest, given what we manufacture there. And we're looking at other areas in the world where potentially we can manufacture, like Central America. But the lion's share of our manufacturing will remain right here in the U.S.
Okay. And then the other kind of challenge I'm kind of curious about is the aging population is obviously, as you say, somewhat of a tailwind because you have and healthier people and all this kind of thing. I guess somewhat of a headwind would be sort of tightening fiscal space for a lot of these governments, right? I mean, as demographics get worse, I imagine the ability to spend sort of well on healthcare in Europe and the United States does decrease to some degree. Is that something you think about?
Yeah. Here's the way I think about it with data, right? And again, it's an interesting conversation with heads of supply, hospital administrators, even governments around the world. Let's take the example of the U.S. Here in the U.S., 85% of the cost of delivering healthcare It's actually not us, the bad guys. It's not pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, or suppliers. That's a fact. So 15% we the bad guys, 85% other costs, labor, readmission rates. Now with some of the changes in CMS, you get penalized in the first 90 days. So why don't we have a debate around that 85%? Can we, medical device companies, take some of that cost out? Can we guarantee shorter surgeries, lower readmission rates? Can we engage the patient earlier? Can we do things that really address, can you have less labor with robots and technology? Could you have less people less labor in an operating room? And I think the answer is yes, right? We got to prove it. So we are doing a lot of risk-sharing agreements. We're piloting different ways to get paid. So it's not a transaction of, I sell you a need for a certain price. It's a bundle of care conversation around taking costs out of the system. So again, early stages, but that's our bold bet, that we're going to be able to prove that we can work on that 85% versus, me reducing the cost of my need 2%, 3%. In aggregate, you're going to be working on the smallest fraction of the large pie.
And then you obviously operate, I think, in fewer countries than you used to, but still 65, you said? 67?
More or less.
Yeah. Which are the markets as you look forward, because you still want some kind of global presence? What are the markets you're kind of excited about in the next 3 to 5 years, both from a manufacturing point of view and from a potential market point of view?
Sure. I'm bullish on the U.S. I think the U.S. is going to continue to be the leader in medtech. I think in the U.S. we still are underpenetrated. I always use the...
You mean from a market point of view?
From a market standpoint,
yeah.
Let's use the example of arthritis. Arthritis is a disease that impacts 600 million people on Earth, roughly 40, 50, 60 million here in the U.S. Less than 5% of those suffering from arthritis are doing something about it. So I think there's an awareness component. I think there's a market development component. I'm not going to ramble through the answer. The U.S. is going to continue to be very relevant. The core 5 countries of Europe, UK, France, Germany, Italy, to a lesser degree, my home country of Spain, Brazil at some point is going to emerge as a huge healthcare opportunity. India, we're talking about it backstage. We'll crack the code on that. China is a question mark. It's a huge opportunity, but it's not the easiest place to do business. Our business is 20% of what it used to be. And Southeast Asia, I think it's going to be a great opportunity. That's commercially. Manufacturing-wise, again, bullish in the US. Central America is a great opportunity. And there are pockets of Eastern Europe that we're looking at.
And then, we're sort of running out of time. This might be the last question, but you've talked so much about sort of the advancements that are coming, AI, robotics. By 2030, what will I be able to do at a hospital that I cannot at the moment?
You'll be able to think more. You'll be able to show human empathy. People ask me often, in a world of robots and technology, what's the one skill set that you got to teach folks in medical schools and residency and fellowship programs? This human empathy. Looking at the person in the eye, reduce your administrative cost, think more, spend more time with patients, and certain aspects of your daily routine is going to go to AI. So that will be my answer.
And then what about from robotics?
Robotics is going to make cases faster, smarter, and better. So I'm not ready to give you an Elon Musk quote that 80% of surgeons are going to disappear, all of that stuff. I just think that all of us are going to become faster, smarter, and better with robotics. And there's going to be coexistence. We partner with a company, running out of time here, we partner with a company called Veritas. We'll be first to market to bring humanoids into hospitals. So you're talking about labor shortages, nurses, all that stuff. That's another addition that we're bringing to the market. So there's going to be coexistence of us and the machines to deliver a more effective, more efficient healthcare for the masses and to all these people that are getting older.
That's great. We're sort of basically out of time. Thank you so much, Ivan.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Please welcome Sean Atkins of Darman Studios and Max Tani of Semafor.
All right, Sean, thank you so much for being here. The New York Times described Darman as Aesop meets Upworthy by way of Logan Paul, which is interesting. You've said, or Darman has said, that your content has generated, I'm going to read some stats, 20 billion views across platforms. You operate a 125,000 square foot, 3-stage production studio in Burbank. But when I've been asking, so pretty big operation, but when I've been asking people as I've been kind of preparing for this event, what I should ask you, many have said that they've never heard of Darman Studios. What do you think the disconnect is there between that just enormous volume of views and the fact that some pretty smart people in media just hadn't heard of you at all?
Hi, everybody. Welcome. The first thing is, just even looking at this room, not the demo. So, the other thing is because the creator industry has is so built on fragmented distribution and fragmented attention. You're talking about people who are global from day one, who have direct access to their audience. And so as a result of that, we don't live in a world of media anymore where there are Super Bowls that often, right? So for any creator, even a giant scale creator's DAR, who's the number 2 according to Forbes in the whole nation, it still means that if you look at our 180 million followers, 8 billion people don't know who he is. And so the analogy I tell people to think about it in media is we're no longer at the world where you can say, I saw this movie and everybody saw it. It's more like when you walk around. If I walk to anybody here today and I said, what are you reading? He's going to answer some novel or some book or something. Odds are I will not have heard of it. But I'll take in faith that what he's reading and tells me, I'll say, is it good? He'll say, yes. I'll be great. And I go to this young lady here, and I'm like, what are you reading? She'll give me something else. That's sort of what creators are. The probability that just like a novel that everybody knows what it is pretty slim, but it doesn't mean that you're not reading somebody who's got hundreds of millions of views. In the case of Darman, across our demo, which is more family-oriented and it's global, it is a viewership of 180 million people who consume about 250 million views per week, or the other equivalent is twice the Super Bowl every single week of the year.
Do you, I guess, but to the fragmentation part of it, obviously, yeah, again, those are some pretty large numbers. But I guess when as you describe it, all of us in the room are watching different things or reading different things. I imagine it is challenging to build a relatively new media business at a moment of fragmentation. How are you guys? You've overcome it, but how?
So the company is relatively young. It's only about 7 years old. And it's fascinating about Dar's story is that he actually had zero intention of being a company. He had zero intention of being a media company. If you follow his story, it's a story of failure and redemption. I tell people from my traditional media sense, if I had gone in and pitched his life story, they would tell me it was too much. It's unbelievable. Because as Dar says, anything that can go wrong in your life, experience you can have, whether it was racial profiling, immigrant, abusive family, got in trouble with the law, got in trouble with the law, he's gone through.
Yeah.
And so it came from this spot of being told that he was a failure, that as an immigrant and a man and a person of color, that he had made so many mistakes in his life, he had no value in the world. It was a pretty low place, as you can imagine. And as he rebuilt his life, he realized that I just wanted to give back. So from that kernel, he just started talking to people, and it turns out that most of us here would attest, in a digital world where most of the content coming at you is very negative, that somebody out there saying like, hey, by the way, you can screw everything in your life, and I think there's still opportunity and growth. And so that spark is what started it.
Yeah.
And then from there, he had the benefit of that started, and then COVID kicked in. And so, a lot of the things that sort of elevated that was causing problems and sort of negative algorithms in the election year, he was doing the antithesis of it, and it really helped drive the company.
So just to give people kind of in here a sense, I want to read a few recent Darman video titles. And I'm going to put some emphasis on words, because of their capitalization. So let me start from one from yesterday. Ugly girl gets revenge on 5 pretty girls. That's one. Girl pulls out all her hair. That's another one.
Yep.
Poor kid not allowed to join Easter. And this one was the one that this one was interesting. Famous gamer won't show his ear on camera. Each of these views has, or will have, in the case of the one from yesterday, over 2 million views. Mm-hmm. Why are people watching them?
So look, part of it is what the magic.
I am curious about the ears.
Yeah. Because one of the magic of what Dar does is that he knows how to hack the algorithm, right? So those are great examples. So like, it sounds pretty provocative. You're like, wait, what? Right? Or if you look at, say, our Facebook side of the business, which pushes more towards adult, you might see something like racist Karen won't let a black man sit in first class or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that's architected because there's an algorithm that rewards antagonism, right? That's why we sort of see the feed issues. The genius of what Dar did is he gets you to click on that because of what the algorithm does. Only what it is, they are all very much what kind of like the article says, Aesop fables.
Yeah.
Right? Because the truth is most of us as human beings raising a family or whatever, you want to raise kids regardless of your race or creed or country, grew up generally on the same values. Don't be a jerk. Be good to people. Be kind. Don't judge by a book by its cover. All those sort of things, which are universal stories. And so that sort of hack the algorithms that lets us tell those stories in those ways. So depending on where you are in the world, I tell people who are my generation, Gen X, if you watched one of our long-form videos, you would feel like you were watching an ABC after-school special from the 80s. If you're the generation after me, you'd feel like you're watching the WB in the 1990s. If you're from Latin America, you feel like you're watching a telenovela. If you're from Asia, you feel like you'd be watching a K-drama or J-drama.
Yeah.
So it is actually one of the most common formats in the world. It's just architected for the digital.
You mentioned before the audience and that this room, may not be the target demo. Can you go a little bit deeper? Because I've seen some various statistics, but yeah, who specifically is watching the video? I read somewhere that it's a large number of people from overseas, and that a lot of people are also relatively young, like a lot younger.
Yeah. So our audience, we actually have a multi-quadrant audience. So we have the core of our target is a 13 to 24-year-old, right? So think about it as like if I was going to use cable parlance, Disney Channel and Freeform, MTV in my day. But if you look at across all the platforms, it's actually teenagers and their parents. So depending on which platform and where the dates go, so you look at our Facebook, our Instagram, our television platforms, not surprisingly, it's mom and dad who are watching it with the teens joining in. If you look at the younger platforms, it's the teen watching with the parents joining in.
Got it. How many videos are you guys making a year? It seems like it's a lot per week. And these are scripted, to be clear, also, these are scripted, fictional, about 20-minute long videos, which is a little bit different from some of the other content that seems to do well on YouTube, which seems to, I still think, is largely unscripted.
Correct. So DAR is the largest scripted studio in digital, bar none. I could make the argument in Los Angeles, where there's a lot of actual television studios, we might be the largest television studios by volume. We make the equivalent of 5 half hours of television every single week original. And that's not including our shorts content, our short content that we do, which probably doubles that number.
How much does it cost to make one of these videos? Because I think one of the reasons why I would imagine there haven't been many of these YouTube-first scripted studios like this is because it does sound pretty expensive to operate 3 stages, 125,000 square feet, and pumping out as many videos as you just mentioned. How much does it cost, and what are the economics like for you guys of making one of these videos?
So our video, I would say, if you kind of compared it to the average YouTuber of our scale, we probably spend 10 to 20 times more than they do to make a video. On the economics, it looks like a lot of media or media tech companies. It's mostly ad-supported, typically freemium models. We have some pay models. We have direct licensing business to a bunch of media players. We have original IP acquisitions from major players. So we did a big deal for Fox, for example, this year. And we have merchandising and the like. The thing that's interesting about creators versus traditional media is that creators actually own their distribution in terms of relationship to the audience, whereas in a linear world I came from, I did not.
So are people finding these videos through the YouTube recommendation algorithm, or are these people who are specifically fans of Darman? Because one of the things that strikes me is that the videos are fairly formulaic, as you mentioned, which is, there's a problem or there's a situation and it's solved and it teaches a lesson, and at the end, I think you've said this in interviews, like basically bad guys lose, good guys win. Everybody loves that, but It's the same story kind of over and over. I guess what I'm asking is, are people kind of, at some point, the audience knows kind of how it's going to end if they're repeat fans. So are people finding it through the algorithm, or are they repeat viewers?
So we have, I just use one of our platforms. Our YouTube audience is 90% repeat. Although most creators, when you do on social platforms, you build your business for your core audience plus, because the algorithm for no matter who you are, no matter what it is, you say Disney, us, whatever it's going to be, the majority of your audience is new for every piece of asset. And so you basically architected to bring in, call it your core that might be 30, 50% of your audience, and then you're hitting the algorithm based on its recommendations. Because you remember, the platforms don't actually care what the piece of content is. What they care is, do I get you to stay as long as humanly possible so I can serve you as many ads as possible?
Right.
And so it's not like if I ran MTV again, where like if you clicked on the channel, I control everything you see there. Here, where you click on the channel, whether it's TikTok or Facebook, I don't control it. I just have an ability to bias the audience to get to it.
So when you mentioned the Fox thing, which I want to get to, but you guys have built a huge, successful business on essentially one platform right now, right? YouTube, which is the biggest. It's probably the smartest bet in terms of the fact that it is the largest streamer that's out there right now. It's global across a bunch of different countries, age brackets, whatnot. But are you ever concerned that one day, Neil Mohan, the CEO of YouTube, wakes up one day and says, "I don't want any more Aesop fable type of content. We're going to change it and downrank this type of thing." Do you worry about being too all in on the one platform?
In our case, we're not. We are, our revenues in terms of platform revenues are diversified at least by 3 parties, almost equally. For example, we're also the largest creator in monetization on the Facebook platform. So for us, it's one of the first things everybody came to. We're pretty diversified on that front. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about this because I've been asked this question for 20 years now. And the way analogy I will use it, and offense to anybody who comes from the shipping business because it's a terrible analogy, but I'm going to use it, is like if I was running a shipping business, no one's asking me every day, like, what are you doing about the ocean? It is, right? Like, I know that there are typhoons, I know there are hurricanes, I know there are pirates, and so I built my business to the best I can to architect it for an environment in which there's a lot of variables I don't control. And so the truth, if you look at Dar's business, if I showed you sort of like the traffic patterns distinct from the revenue patterns, you'd see like killing it, nope.
Yeah.
Killing it, nope. And so the superpower of a creator business is actually they know how to live in an algorithmic world that has unpredictability. Just like if you're somebody who's running a shipping business, you know how to live in a world where the ocean might decide to send a rogue wave against one of your oil tankers one day and not the next.
So so one of the things that you guys are doing obviously is you use real actors, real cameras, shooting stuff. You know where I'm going with this. How are you guys already using AI, and do you plan on lowering costs significantly by using AI for some of the visual storytelling aspects as well?
One of the things that makes us very different, because like I said from the beginning, like Dar didn't start to try and build a media company, start to build a company to send a message out in the world. And so he didn't come at it with actually any knowledge of the media business. I said it's one of the most fascinating things that entrepreneurs who actually change industry have a tendency to change it because they don't know there's a bunch of rules. So he didn't know there was a bunch of rules. For example, Dar himself has written 2,000 screenplays. That means that he has done single-handedly in 4 years the equivalent of 30 years of The Simpsons' entire writing room by himself. Now, if he'd been told what he was supposed to do, he should have been hiring hundreds and hundreds of writers over the time, but that he did not know. And so the first thing, as an audience, first thing, we don't think sort of in the old model.
He wrote most of these himself?
Correct.
Oh, interesting.
Correct. He still show runs the main channels to this day. The second thing is that we think about AI, like most people do, is it's an enhancement tool, right? Like I've gone through a bunch of iterations in it. So like AI does not get rid of actors. Our fans like specific actors. I'm not going to get rid of them. But what could AI help me, as it does right now, figure out how to use our operational systems more efficiently? Yes, we use it right now. Is there a day where we might be able to say, hey, one of our actors is working with us and they're sick and they gave us the permission to use their voice? Sure.
Yeah.
Like under the right conditions and with the right relationships, we would do something like that. But we're not really looking at AI as a replacement because it gets rid of the human connection that creators really care about. And that's, in my opinion, that's going to be the last thing to go when the cyborgs come.
Well, Sean, unfortunately, we're out of time. But good luck with your oceanic navigation. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Please welcome Secretary Doug Burgum of the Department of Interior and Hadley Gamble of IMI.
Good afternoon, everybody. Last session of the day, really exciting, and I'm frankly quite excited to be seated next to this gentleman. It's, of course, Doug Burgum, the Interior Secretary. Doug, I just want to kick off by asking you to walk us through where we are today, because essentially what we're seeing, at least so far, is President Trump's blockade of Iranian ports working, and the potential for a ceasefire now between Israel and Lebanon, something everybody's been worrying about. So how quickly is this all going to be over?
Well, Hadley, great to be with you. Always fantastic to be with you. To be some of you, you understand the global market. So fun to have this conversation. But I would step back even further. Where are we right now? I mean, let's just realize what a remarkable moment we are. I mean, 6 weeks since this current conflict began, and then here we are with the United States, now the world's largest oil exporter, the world's largest producer of natural gas, the world's largest LNG producer. 4 years ago, we had the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The U.S. has now displaced 2/3 of Russian gas in Europe, and then we're doing that. So we're providing LNG to the world, and the gas price for natural gas in America is below where it was when we started 6 weeks ago. So the whole idea of energy dominance by President Trump, his strategy is working, which is sell energy to our friends and allies, so and have produced so much of it that that they don't have to buy from people that are waging war against us, that they don't have to buy from people that are terrorizing the world, and then you end up with low prices at home, so prosperity at home, peace abroad, and then you have the power of energy diplomacy. So President Trump is doing things that have never been done before because it started with energy policy. Energy policy is national security, and so from that standpoint, I would say the transformational moment that we're having right now, and whether it's Venezuela, whether it's the Middle East, is remarkable, but it begins with understanding and getting energy policy right, and President Trump really has energy policy right.
Tell me this, 20 million barrels, or 20% of the world's oil, I should say, coming out of the Gulf Arab countries. How quickly are we going to open up that strait and get that oil flowing?
Well, I think as you noted, I mean, the blockade is working. And of course, the other thing I'd say when you take a look at the geopolitics of the situation, again, what you understand well is there are shifting strengths within the alliances. We still have all of our allies, but some people have stood up. And I'd say the one thing that coming out the backside of this is, I mean, wow, the Gulf states, I mean, whether it's UAE, Saudi, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, I mean, all of these countries that immediately became under assault from their neighbor is understanding the importance of a U.S. relationship, and the U.S. understands and appreciates deeply, with deep gratitude, the support that we've had from those countries. So again, I think working together, obviously the blockade, which allows ships to flow out from our Gulf state partners, but not from Iran. Again, brilliant strategy, U.S. Navy executing on it. And I feel like the U.S. is in a very strong position right now. And again, you can't talk about all this without talking about Venezuela, because Venezuela, here we are. We had to move on quickly from that, but we took a sanctioned adversary, and in 45 minutes, President Trump turned it into a strategic ally, and now their production up close to 50%. I mean, they've hit 1.2 million barrels a day, 150 million barrels of oil coming out of Venezuela onto the market at world market prices. A lot of that now flowing to the United States that wasn't flowing before. It's just remarkable the change that's happening right now. So, I mean, dialing back and looking at the big picture a little bit, you'd have to say that we're in an amazing point in history right now.
Tell me this, we have two competing narratives. If you're over at the IMF meetings, we're talking about the potential for a global recession. They're talking about the idea, as is the IEA, the International Energy Agency, that we're not going to be able to recover in terms of oil and gas prices for as long as 2 years of production even. Are they wrong?
I'm not a pundit, and I'm not going to criticize other people that are pundits, but I would just say the track record here of people predicting all the things that they thought were going to happen every day during the last 38 or 39 or 40 days of this conflict generally have turned out to be wrong within a day or two. And so I'm looking at the big picture, and I think the big picture of the fundamentals. I mean, here in the United States, we've got, we celebrated Tax Day yesterday, which normally was like sort of a big X on the calendar, not a day you'd celebrate. But when you've got 63 million Americans that have paid into Social Security their whole life that are not paying tax on Social Security. You've got 25 million people that are now not paying tax on overtime. They're incented to work. When I was a kid growing up in a small town in North Dakota, I couldn't wait to get past 40 hours because then you got into overtime. You got that time and a half. I mean, that was great. But now you're into that overtime and then you're not paying taxes on that. No tax on tips. That's averaging about $7,000 per filer. In terms of deductions on tips. So whether it's lower taxes, massively lower regulations, I mean, what we're doing with the ESA, NEPA, what Lee Zeldin is doing, what Chris Wright is doing, what everybody across the National Energy Dominance Council is doing, I mean, massively cutting the amount of red tape, and then record amounts of foreign investment coming into the country. There's no recession coming to the United States. I mean, that's one prediction I will make because the fundamentals are super strong. And as I noted at the beginning, natural gas, which is an energy superpower, costs less now today in the U.S. than it did 6 weeks ago.
So when Fatty Birol essentially saying that we haven't even begun to see the severity of the price increase on oil production. On oil.
No, I'm not saying that. I mean, what I'm saying is that I think that there are, when you have a price signal that goes out, which is, hey, prices are higher, there's a gap to fill, people may have to fill their reserves, that's when the private sector companies, all say, hey, maybe this is a time for us to start, getting more production going. But we're seeing that production is coming up. I mean, last month was the highest it's ever been. It'll be higher again next month. I mean, we've got a great industry here, and we know that they can dial it up. And then what we're doing with regulation, or what we're doing, things like whether it's the Jones Act, we have other tools in the toolkit in terms of potential waivers that we could be providing right now to get more production out of the U.S. But I'm very confident that we're going to see supply continue to climb. Coming out of this, and particularly with the straits open to our Gulf partners, then supply-demand is going to come back in balance again.
Tell me this, you've just gotten off a phone call with some of America's top producers. This was a call that was leaked, but walk us through what they had to say.
Well, it was a great call. Chris Wright and I spent 45 minutes I think in the last hour, we were just on this call with a couple dozen of the top, the global multinationals, but some of the top U.S. Oil and gas producers from around all the basins. So Marcellus, the Permian, the Bakken, and the North Slope of Alaska. And again, across that group, these guys are all leaning in because they're getting a price signal that, hey, there's a time to invest. They had some great suggestions and ideas about things that we could do, on a temporary basis to help cut some red tape and speed things. And they had some, super complimentary things to say, which is great to hear for our teams that have been working so hard. When we took office a year ago, or when President Trump, took office as president, and then the cabinet came in, one of the things that we inherited in Interior, which is responsible for the oil and gas drilling permitting on federal land, was a backlog of 5,600 applications to drill. Some of those had been sitting there for years. We've knocked that backlog down by 91%. We've almost eliminated the whole thing. So to have multiple of these leaders say, hey, it used to take us years to get a permit from the federal government, and now it's taking months. I mean, that's rewarding to hear because it's about speeding up the flow of capital investment, which again, when we've got energy as a component of everything, the car you drive, the clothes that you wear, the food that you eat. I mean, it's a component of everything, to turn on these lights to heat this building or air condition it. So when we get energy policy right, that's what makes things more affordable. And we've absolutely got it. We were working on the supply side. I mean, which is again.
So they're happy with permitting, but what were they saying is their greatest concern or challenge?
Well, I think they just continue to point out places where they're like thrilled on everything we've done, but hey, here's things that you could do more, and we want to do that. I view people that are willing to write a check for a lease sale, develop with 100% of their money. They go in, they take all the risk of doing the development, then they send a check to the federal government for a royalty portion. They're sending money to us. They're paying for the lease, and they're sending us royalties. They're the customer. Our job is to make sure that they do that sustainably and smartly, but their shareholders look after them, our regulators look after them, and we add it all up. I mean, American energy industry produces cleaner, safer, smarter than anywhere else in the world. This idea that somehow that if we shut down doing everything in America, where we don't cut a tree, we don't graze for cattle, we don't do any mining in this country, we get out of the oil and gas business. If you do we're going to stop doing all of that, but somehow that's going to be good for the global environment. No, it's actually, then we're just handing it over to countries that either A, want to extort us, like with critical minerals, or they don't have child labor laws, they don't have reclamation laws, they don't have an EPA, and look at the actual results. People that care about the environment should be insisting that the United States produce, every electron, every ounce of liquid fuel, because that's in the end the best thing for the world and for global peace, and it's the best thing for the environment.
Tell me this, when we talk about our allies, we're seeing France and the United Kingdom talking about reopening the Strait of Hormuz. How they're going to do that without the input of the United States is a big question in my mind, but they're meeting on Friday to do that. In your mind, where are they today in terms of their interest situation? Because the United Kingdom is truly suffering.
Well, yes, and it's remarkable to me that we can have, our traditional World War II, allies. France and England have, strong industrial companies like Germany all get energy policy just so dramatically wrong. Germany went down this path of their own green dream, the green fantasy, and spent $500 billion. That's what was all in on their wind and solar dream. And they produce about 20% less electricity than they used to. It costs 3 times as much, and they're deindustrializing, and then it's intermittent. You can't count on it.
And for the United Kingdom, this is actually a national security issue.
It's a huge national security. The UK today gets 30% of their electricity from undersea cables that you could already have. A foreign power has already got a mine put on one of those. If you want to take down the UK on day one, one little mine, boom, there goes the electricity. Is anybody going to build a data center, that produces that? We're in a world where for the first time in history, you can take a kilowatt of electricity and not just produce light and heat, but you can produce intelligence. You can manufacture intelligence. And believe me, I spent 30 years in tech. I was in a meeting yesterday morning getting the latest updates of how we're applying AI, into the procedures across this vast enterprise called Interior, where we've got, 500 million acres of land, 700 million acres of subsurface, 3 billion of offshore. We started out a year ago with 65,000 employees. If it was a standalone company, it'd be the largest balance sheet in the world. We didn't even know all the different processes we have, but I saw one process where it was a small process in IT where they were going to get a bid and have a team of 12 skilled people work for 2 years on a $3 million budget to try to fix this one IT problem. And we had one guy who was home on the weekend shrinking his wife's clothes because he was trying to do laundry for her while the baby was crying. And he set up an agentic entity on a leading AI product to do the work that was being bid out to take 2 years and $3 million. And in a course of several hours for a $182 charge, all the code got written by the AI machine.
I want to ask you about data.
It's not like, we're going to get a 10% improvement in coding. That AI codes better than 99% of the coders in America. It is so transformational that I would say just about every CEO I've ever met does not understand the implications of what this can mean for problem solving and what it could mean for us for further speeding up. Yeah, we've gone from years to months on permitting. But we have other problems where we could speed it up and make it even stronger and faster and better and more precise, and protecting the environment, solving cancer.
I want to ask you about this specifically because obviously the United States has been a big proponent of Gulf countries setting up data centers, but there are big questions now if bombs and missiles can reach them, whether or not that would be a good idea. Is the U.S. still backing the Gulf countries, specifically the UAE and Saudi Arabia, to do so?
Well, I think every country is going to want to have some sovereign stake in manufacturing intelligence. And I would say that if you look at the Gulf states actually have got quite a strong record, but of course, many of them are well equipped with U.S.-made, defense systems, and whether those are Patriots or other things. They've done very well, even though they've got a close neighbor. But that was another reason to, take a literally a terrorist regime. I mean, I don't even think of Iran anymore as a traditional country. I think of it like a terrorist machine, a terror group that had control of an oil field, and then they were holding 90 million people hostage. I mean, it's more like North Korea, where you've got a group of folks that are believe in things like eliminating Israel, eliminating the United States, but they're not. But as a side deal, they're kind of trying to run a country. It's not like the way we would think of a normal country because of the way the control systems. But that now that the amount of the capability of them to continue to wage war on their neighbors or on the world has been seriously degraded in the last 38 days. And that.
So you think those Dubai hotel bookings are going to get back on track pretty quick?
Well, I think it's
Q4.
I think again, it's weird when we think about this thing as a war. When we lost more planes in training missions last year than we lost in a 6-week war. I mean, it is like the expectation was apparently that you could, convert a country in 45 minutes like we did in Venezuela. And so, wow, it's taking you guys 6 weeks to change the world. It's like, no, it was a 6-week plan and we're right on track. So again, we're living in remarkable times. And it's not just the fact that the world is waking up to the fact that the energy policy is not just going to drive economies, it's also driving the next wave of capital investment. Because I'm telling you, no one is going to put advanced manufacturing, no one's going to put distribution, no one is going to have whatever the new version of higher education is. You're not going to go and do that someplace where electricity costs 3 or 4 times more than it does in a next door that has a different set of policies, because electricity is going to be the key factor in site selection for the next with T's, the trillions of dollars of CapEx that's being deployed around the world. The 5 hyperscalers in America when the last time you and I talked, their number was 400 billion. 400 billion for next year. 5 companies, 400 billion of CapEx. Those companies, several of them have already announced that next year they're going from 90 billion to 180 billion. So just that group of 5 U.S. companies could be doing 800 billion in CapEx around power generation and AI. So it's like, I know we're all kind of focused on whatever the news feeds us every day, but pull back a little bit, people, because man, we are at a transformative point. The U.S. is navigating through this, I think, in a quite brilliant way. The things that we need to do, though, is we need to generate more electricity. More energy abundance raises the quality of life for people on the planet, and we want to be able to do it for, again, we want to do it for prosperity at home, but we want to do it for peace in the world. Energy abundance equals energy diplomacy, equals a better future.
So oil prices at $3 by summer.
Well, I think we want to separate oil prices from gas prices, but and again, I'm not going to be a pundit on pricing because a lot of things, markets will be markets, and they'll figure the thing out. But I think that again, we're in such a strong position in the United States, and it is and we're doing everything we can every day. We got whether it's Jared Agan and everybody at the National Energy Dominance Council that are doing great work within the White House. But I mean, our job is to listen to the people that are producing